Blake, I think the most important thing, like Charlie is for real a sincere Christian.
Yes.
And I think you're going to want to work for someone who is a for real, sincere, deeply believing Christian.
Yes.
And, because then you'll disagree on a lot of things, but you will align on really important things.
Yes.
And I think that was what carried the day with me. And I'm very glad it did. And, at the time, as you said, it was like, at the time I came in, he was just a very different person.
Yes.
And it was over time realizing all the ways that, as you say, you have to really see it. You're like, is this for real? Like,
you and I talked about this.
What is it? Is this going to work? You would also have that where you're like, this can't possibly work, right? And it does. And it does because he's so completely, intently, sincere, and fully all in on it. And I think that's what like amazed young people. Like, when you go to these campus events and, I think there's a lot of, you'll see these people online who are like very like performatively trad or Christian or whatever because it like owns the libs or whatever.
Yeah,
And then,
exactly.
But Charlie's just like, no, I like 100% believe in this, and because I believe it is true and because it is important and I want everyone else to believe in it because it is true and I think it is the most important decision they will ever make. And it would always shine through in what he was doing and how he behaved that he really believed that. And
I mean, I think, and you know this because you were at some of the campus stops, I was at some of the campus stops. 90% of the interactions as he got older, right? The brand of Charlie was almost cemented, in 2018, where he was much younger and he was like a peer to the kids on college, and he would say, Charlie Kirk destroys the libs or whatever. And that was just titling. It wasn't actually in Charlie's heart, but Charlie, by the way, didn't determine the titles. Like people
he didn't
behind
want
the
to
scenes.
destroy anybody.
No, behind the scenes, that's a social media team that's doing the titling. That wasn't Charlie picking the title. Anyways. But the point is, as he got older, he transitioned to a much more big brother, and people started observing like this incredible Herculean patience that he would exhibit in these interactions with sometimes bad faith people, but sometimes people that just had bad ideas. And 90%, if you went and sat there and watched the entire 3-hour Prove Me Wrong, 90% of it is him being kind and gentle and thought-provoking and working through whatever was the lie that was stuck in this kid's head, or sometimes professors, but he would work with them through it and use the Socratic method to draw out the truth. And it was a beautiful thing. And, he doesn't get nearly enough credit for that because the Charlie Destroys the Libs clip goes mega viral, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. I have to say, when all that happened to you, I just cannot say how painful. Well, because we've talked about it many times, but that was like one of the most painful things that's ever happened to me in my life. Because we have such a tight staff and the same staff. Like I don't have new people working for me really ever, and I don't care to. So that was really, really painful.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted you to have health insurance. My expectations for you were so low because you had been so mistreated and maligned and slandered, and it's just so hard to come back from that. The fact that he put you on the air is
possibly a mistake.
Why? It was not a mistake, but that is so wild.
So I have an insight into that piece of the story because I was aware of this other job opportunity, and I see it now all as like God's plan. And I was working on kind of a panel show idea, but I didn't have it was just like a nugget of an idea that was back in my head. And I remember kind of just intuiting that in order to like restore this man that had been so wronged by Oliver Darcy or whatever in CNN, these scumbags, I thought,
I need to forgive Oliver Darcy. Thank you for reminding me. As we forgive those who trespass against us, he needs to be my daily rotation.
So, but and by the way, I ended up in that moment, when we were talking with Blake at the beginning, I looked back at your monologue from that night. And maybe it wasn't your monologue, maybe it was the final segment, but you said you really were defiant, and it was beautifully done because you were back at you were part of something and only had so much control at that moment, right? And so
they were bullying me. Suzanne Scott got me. I was in the parking lot of a place I was in Bozeman, Montana fishing, and she called me, and I went outside to do my pre-show bathroom break, always outside if I can do it. And she called me and she said, you need to say what he said was wrong. And I said, I'm not doing that, period. And you can fire me and the show's live in 10 minutes. I'm not doing that. And she goes, well, I guess I can't make you. And until the day she fired me, she never really talked to me after that.
Yeah. I'm not trying to get into any of that, but I do believe that.
I want to get into it. It was horrible what they did to him.
I'm just saying, I don't know where to go with it. I will say, Tucker, this is awkward for me.
Sorry.
No, I would just say that I think this moment has profoundly changed all of us, including people like Suzanne. And I just want to say briefly, for what it's worth, she's been exceedingly wonderful
I shouldn't
and kind.
say that. And we all changed, and I've done crappy things, a lot of crappy things in my life, so I shouldn't be judgy.
But to your point, your hands were tied in that moment, and you defiantly said, I remember you said, I just want everybody to know that you are gloating over a young man's life being ruined, and shame on you. You basically, I'll never forget that. And I remember thinking, okay, like if Tucker's got his back in this moment, this guy's pretty great.
He's the best.
Yeah, and he's been the best, and I love having Blake on our
They came
team.
out of nowhere, man. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that as long as I live. But anyway, the point is, whatever. And I shouldn't even brought up
we put him on
Fox.
air.
Exactly.
And by the way, and now look at this. The show is going on. Erica Kirk has demanded that the show goes on, and we're going to figure out the details. And Blake is going to be critical to that. And if we hadn't have created this roster, this thought crime crew that we do on Thursdays, I don't know what we would do.
But it takes the bravery of an individual to get there. So like everything is fine now, and Blake can do whatever he wants, and people know who he is because they get to see him, and they can make their own judgments about him. But when Charlie made that decision, and he's the one who would have been blamed if it had gone wrong, people didn't know who Blake was apart from what they read in the New York Times. Slander devised by CNN and Oliver Darcy. That's a fact. And not helped by a lot of other people who I shouldn't be attacking. You're right. Sorry about that. But he's the one who allowed Blake's life to continue. And I felt it so strong because that's my world. Like, I know what that is. And most people are like, well, you can't put him on air. Like, he did bad things. I heard that. And Charlie was like, he was willing to stand up to them and say, no, that's not true. Like, most people are not going to do that. No one will do that. And
Well, I remember the nasty articles. There was a few. And Charlie would just write back, LOL.
so that's courage. In case you're wondering what courage is, that's actual courage. And you know that it is because it's so rare. Nobody does that. If people do that, who are they? I live in this world. Like I know every single person hosting every single show and they don't do that. And he did that. And so that's what actual courage is. Courage is standing up for what is true in the service of other people, in the service of showing love to other human beings. That's the commission that we get from Jesus, period. And he actually did that at great risk to himself. And anyway, I've had like 50 text exchanges about this all week. Anyway, bless you, Blake, for being
thank you.
the center of that.
Thanks for standing with us.
Thank you very much.
Genuinely. Can I say something that you told me that the night of that blew my mind? And
Go for it.
So
we're bringing Blake to the brink here.
We were in Provo the night of, and it was like we were all shell shocked. And Blake was there with them when it happened, and we filter in late at night into this little like corner of the restaurant, the hotel in Salt Lake City, and I don't know how it came up, but Blake says I will never forget it. He said, "Charlie gave me my life back."
Yep.
And I knew exactly what he meant, and now I think the audience does too.
Amen.
And with that, we're going to give Blake a bailout, get out of jail free card. We're going to take a radio break.
Cut to black.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Similar to will take a question and they aren't worried. They actually think that it's going to help actuaries do their job more efficiently. Go again for ultra that way. Needing to so a scam.
It remains open. I get to ask you a question.
Okay.
When did you meet Charlie? And tell us about how your relationship with Charlie grew, because I think it's
So I
fascinating.
met Charlie when he was a teenager. He was connected to, funded by a close friend of ours called Foster Freeze, who's a wonderful man from Wilmington, Delaware, well, really from Wisconsin, but lived in Wilmington, then Jackson, Wyoming, and was an investor in a company that we had, and more important, like an actual friend, really the only investor I've ever had in anything, and a very enthusiastic Christian man. And the kind of person who was just a collector of people. You know, I met this person who was so enthusiastic, and almost everybody around him was just wonderful. But because he was so rich and so generous, he did collect. There were phonies in the orbit, because there always are when someone's rich, right? And so he tells me at dinner about this kid he's met. He's only 18. He's not going to college. I've always been opposed to college my whole life. I tried to convince all my kids not to go. I mean, I really meant it. And so he's like, "You love this guy. He's not going to college." And I was like, "Man, I love that, because I really am opposed, and I mean it." And I'm like, "It sounds great." And he's like, "Da da 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 da." And I'm thinking, "Oh man, some fast-talking kid." It was like throwing back Reagan quotes or something at poor Foster. You know, who's in his 70s and like late 60s, and he doesn't know. And I really assumed that Charlie was just some predator, and I didn't like it at all. And of course, there's the bias against young people. I mean, Charlie's literally the age of one of my children, so like, and I felt he's probably just totally conventional, telling old people what they want to hear, sucking up to the donors, whatever. So I meet him. I thought he was smart as hell, but I was very skeptical. Then I have this. He calls me, "Would you do an event?" Sure, I was going to be in the state anyway, so I do it. And we have this kind of sort of debate, not really a debate. Well, what actually happened was I was going to give a speech, and I got there. We were backstage. He's like, "Well, actually, let's just do a Q&A." And I was like, "I don't know, son. I don't think you want to do that with me, because I'm kind of a jerk." You know, which I am in those settings, right? So he's like, no, I want you. We can, it's okay to have a debate. I was like, "I don't know, man. Like, I disagree with your views on economics and foreign policy, and I'm pretty hot on these topics. So I'm just letting you know that." "Oh, no problem at all." So we end up having this kind of intense thing, and I'm like passionately opposed to marijuana and drugs. I'm just having used a lot of drugs as a child. Like, I'm very opposed to drugs. Charlie never used any drugs in his whole life, and he was at the time, he was kind of libertarian on the subject. And I remember saying, "Everyone in the crowd is for weed. Like, you think you're so cool, but actually it's a control device designed to make you passive and accepting of the system that's destroying you." And people kind of booed me or whatever, but Charlie looked at me like, I think that may be right. And it was that issue. It was weed of all issues. You know, it's not my top issue, but I do feel it really strongly. I hate marijuana, okay? And I know it's really cool, but no, it's like fully corporate, actually. And it's wrecking Americans, especially boys.
It's wrecking the parking lot of the grocery store nearby.
It makes me feel like getting my gun. Like, I really feel that way about it. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I really am mad about it. And Charlie grooved with that. And that moment set off this like conversation. So I was in Arizona for something. He's like, "Let's go to lunch, let's go to dinner." And we started having these really intense conversations, started putting him on Fox. And his views were changing. And mine were too, by the way. It's not like I converted him. It's like I had been all kinds of embarrassing things during the scope of my long life. A libertarian, a self-described neocon. Can you imagine? I mean, I'll admit it. I like got mad at Alex Jones for asking questions about 9/11. What? Like, I was like a horrible person, or a very close-minded person. I was totally wrong about everything. And so I didn't judge. Like, you should change your mind as the evidence changes. The things you thought were going to work didn't. An honest man asks himself why they didn't work and what might work. Like, that's the process of adulthood. And Charlie, young people are very inflexible about what they believe. I have found, and I have a lot of young people, I have a lot of children. He was one of the only young people I've ever met who was like, "Oh yeah, I think I was wrong." And only belief in Jesus allows you to say that, because you know that you're not judged. You know that honesty is the ticket, and that if you pursue an honest path, you'll be okay. And you don't need the adulation from the crowd. You don't need the love of strangers to feel good about yourself, because you know that you are loved. It gives you true freedom. And he had that. Charlie had no problem at all getting up and being like, "I was a neocon." And of course, with me, he didn't, because he knew that I was too. I'm like cheering on the Iraq War, which I did. Like, I literally did that. And I'm ashamed of it, but I'm also proud to admit it because I think that it's important to let people know that you can admit being wrong. It's okay. It's all right. We're people. We're not gods. You can be wrong.
We're going to end this radio segment. We're going to be right back on the stream, so don't go anywhere. Very, very test of all the fringe issues that he knew he was on the unpopular side. He was very, very vehemently against weed.
No way.
Oh, he went hard on it.
Yes.
I think you really got at it where, one, he was totally unafraid of being in a huge minority on an issue and being frank about it. People would ask, and he'd be like, they'd ask him about like abortion, and he'd be like, look, my position on that is a tiny minority in the United States, and I'm going to keep trying anyway. And he'd say that on, gay marriage, where the polls would say, a big majority support it and all of that. And at the same time, yeah, the zero shame about if he had to change his views. You see that so often with politicians. Well, actually, that was a different situation. I voted that way because it wasn't like that. And he'll just be like, oh no, I was wrong. I hadn't thought about this.
But you can't be controlled. If you will, this is how the media control politicians. They find some clip if the politician's saying something different 10 years ago. It's like, well, it was a different country 10 years ago.
He would do that. We would see these clips. These really they'd be like, look, here's Charlie defending this issue, and I would be like, Charlie, they dug up that old clip, and he goes, oh yeah, that was back when I was a cuck.
100%.
And
but there's no shame in that. And Charlie's example of admitting the truth about himself in public is the most edifying and important thing you can ever do, because it shows people you can take the leash off and you can live in freedom because you're loved. You can tell the truth. We're all going to die anyway. This is the deepest truth. And your job is to be honest and to be loving to other people. Okay, that's your job. Only belief in God allows that. And once you do it, it's like, it's not only fine, it's great. It's actual liberation.
You said that, I remember, at the first AmFest when you came back. So you had the debate, and then you came back.
The unplanned debate.
Oh, I remember feeling so honored that you came back. It was our first AmFest, and we really needed somebody of your caliber and your I'm going to say it, your fame, your the weight that you held in the movement, especially. I mean, it was an honor to us to have you there.
I was so excited.
You came out the first night, and you just said, "Let me say a few words about Charlie. He's willing to change his mind. He's willing to adapt." And I knew that was your subtle nod to the people who might have judged you. Maybe you weren't even thinking that, but it felt like it was at least saying, listen, I know some of you think Charlie's a certain way. Let me tell you, from that 2017 or whatever 18 debate to now, I think it was 2021. A couple years had gone by since we'd had you back, and then you've been back ever since.
But it's so important. I just can't say it enough to be honest about yourself. It's very easy to be honest about everybody else. Oh, you're fat. I don't like your dress. That's super easy. It's very hard to be honest about yourself. I'm fat. I'm wearing an ugly dress. No one wants to admit that. But once you do, the fetters are off and you are so free. And Charlie just lived that. I feel like that's almost one of the most important things, is to admit the truth about yourself. And then no one can control you. What can you say about me that I won't readily concede about myself? Nothing. And then what are you going to do to me? Nothing. Oh, it's amazing.
I read that poem a week ago about Charlie, and I always think about that other one. It's a much more famous one, If, by Rudyard Kipling.
Yes.
And it really does just perfectly describe Charlie. If you can, speak with kings but not lose the common touch.
Exactly.
And the really one, the one that ends the poem, which you don't hear quoted as much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds distance run or something like that. I might be getting that wrong. But he really did encapsulate all everything of that poem about what it is to be a true man, to be a true adult, to be a heroic figure. I don't know,
you want me to read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you.
Yeah.
If you can trust yourselves when all men doubt you.
Exactly.
Yourself. But make allowances for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same.
Exactly.
If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and to stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after you are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
It's incredible. And the line that jumps out to me, which is the truest, and everyone, I think, understands it at some point, if you can treat triumph and disasters, those two imposters, the same, they are imposters, actually. Because, I'm not trying to leach the meaning from the human experience. It is meaningful, but it's not the real point, actually. And there's a sense in which this is...
It just stands out to me how many of those things we just referenced in the past hour.
Yeah, and I bet
being lied about, don't deal in lies.
That's the one thing that I kept thinking about. If you can wait and not be tired, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And,
But
how many
winning is the
times-
real trap. Winning is the trap. That's where men destroy themselves. That was he and I talked about that recently all the time.
Well, yeah, but
Winning is when you decide that you're God. That's the David moment for most men. Surviving triumph is the real trick, and so few can do it, and he could. I think
it's a beautiful. Thank you for bringing that. Actually, Blake has brought 2 poems to us this week that
I am the egghead.
have. I mean, that one about from World War I. What was the name of that poem?
For the Fallen.
For the Fallen.
Blake
And
can read poetry in a very heterosexual way, which is amazing.
Are you saying that I just did it in a non?
No. That was so straight. It was unbelievable. I'm just saying you don't meet a lot of guys who are like, I want to share some poetry with you.
I've never been accused. I have an unblemished record of heterosexuality. And you know, it's funny. I'm stealing that line from Charlie Kirk. He would always say, I have an unblemished record of heterosexuality. Why don't we take a quick little break? We're going to reset, and we'll be back for radio.
I don't. You just into the important question. Kind of overly.
I should have finished the show. And of course, the wonderful, the great, the legendary, and Tucker, you don't get enough credit for something. I should have finished it. The Tucker Carlson. But you don't get enough credit for something. I just want people to understand that Tucker, I mean, I've seen you backstage, I don't know, more times than I can count now. And you are the exact same with the guy who's taking out the trash as our PAs and our assistants and the people in between as you are with Charlie or me or Blake. You are the exact same human, and I really want everybody to know that about you, because you wouldn't say it about yourself. You treat everybody like you. I can't tell you how many times that has occurred to me, because I'll be needing to drag you somewhere we need you to go, but you're deep into a conversation in the corner with the assistant that like I don't even know that I necessarily do the name of this because we have so many plays right, and you would just be like engrossed in this deep conversation, and I would feel bad, oh, we gotta grab Tucker, he's gotta go on stage in like 5 minutes or something. And I love that about you, man, and I just want the world to know.
Well,
that.
thank you. No, I mean, I love people, and God created everyone. But it's also true that I grew up in rich people world back when it was an egalitarian world. It's one of the main changes in my country, in my lifetime, is that rich people are not egalitarian anymore. But I grew up, in an affluent family around rich people, and the housekeeper comes to Thanksgiving dinner, period. And that's a WASP thing. I'm just going to say it out loud. That's a WASP thing, and that's gone. But we felt that very, very strongly, and I just think that's right. And
You know what? It's not gone because we still believe it, and you still believe it.
I
You model it.
really believe it. I really believe. I'll just say one thing. Everyone hates the WASPs, and I beat up on them constantly. But in the club that I spent my life at, I don't even know if they're clubs anymore. But the only thing you could do to get booted from the club was to be rude to the staff. Period. You could be drunk. They're always drunk, of course. You could be, whatever. You could say anything. But if you were rude to a waiter, you were gone. I mean, they wouldn't even have hearing about it, because so deep was the culture on that question. It's that we are all underneath it all the same. We were all created by God. We have different aptitudes or language. We're very different in a lot of ways, but fundamentally, we're all going to stand alone before God. And that was the idea that spawned the Democratic Republic that we grew up in anyway. That's the core idea of America that is never articulated anymore. We didn't have fast track at Disney World when I was growing up. And I still feel that way, and I'm married to a chick who really feels that way. I mean, really feels. You get married in my family, and the guy who cuts her grass is coming to your wedding, whether you like it or not. Like, that's the rule in my house.
I love that.
I'm not saying that to make myself sound
No.
virtuous. It's just like that is something that we have lost, and we have to fight to regain that. And all these like little fake aristocrats flying around in their planes. It's one of the reasons I really am upset with them, is because they've forgotten that specific thing.
Charlie wanted better elites, and
Yes.
and I mean, you model it, and it's not gone because we're talking about it right now, and maybe we can bring it back. In the spirit of actually doing a show, we have
Sorry, it's like one of my obsessions.
I have this great clip that I can't wait to share with everybody. But we're going to bring in Frank Turek, who crosstalk. He was with Charlie on the day. Charlie, he would go to Frank with ideas of apologetics and how to argue for the faith and contend for the faith in the public square. So, Frank, welcome to the Charlie Kirk Show with Tucker Carlson, the great Tucker Carlson, with us.
Hey,
Hey, I just want to piggyback on something Tucker just said. The only worldview that agrees with what Tucker just said is Christianity. In Hinduism, there's a caste system. In Islam, if you're not a Muslim, you're a second-class citizen. In the secular world, there's no way to ground these moral values and the moral worth that every individual has. The only worldview that does that is Christianity. And that was the worldview that Charlie and everybody here at this table right now wants to demonstrate is true and try and persuade young people to follow.
I love that you said that. I think that is indisputably true. I think it's provable. I mean, the founding documents still exist. We know what the people who wrote them were thinking, and they were informed by a culture that is a product of Christian civilization, period. Western civilization is Christian civilization. And I'm not against other religions, by the way. I don't follow them, but I'm not mad at them. I'm just going to want to say that. I'm not. I know a lot of great people who are of different faiths, but Christianity is unique in that it's true, and it's unique in that it believes that every person is at least potentially chosen by God, every person. And the whole New Testament is that story, by the way. And so Christians feel that deeply. The cultures that they create reflect it, and I grieve its passing, and I pray for its return to our country.
Well, ironically, Tucker, Charlie's martyrdom might be the turning point to bring it back. I don't know. Well, you do know because you're seeing what's going on at TPUSA right now.
Yes.
How many people want to start TPUSA chapters? What are we up to now, Andrew? Is it 62,000, something like that?
Yeah, it's growing by the minute. So it's probably, let's just say, approximately 65,000.
Whoa.
We had 2,000 before that. I mean, I'm seeing people online on some YouTube videos that have to do with Charlie. Some of my own YouTube videos. They're all over the world. There's people in Denmark going, I was an atheist, and because of Charlie Kirk, I'm a Christian now. Australia, same thing. London, same thing. This isn't just in America. This is happening all over the world. And so I want to commend every one of you for advancing the cause that Charlie was so near and dear to Charlie's heart in a time of mourning. It's got to be so difficult, Andrew and Blake especially, to continue on. But Charlie would want it, and that's why we're all here right now.
Well, and Frank, bless you. I know you've had to deal with the conspiracy theories and why'd you touch your hat at this time? Because, that wretched video. I mean, but bless you, brother. I just want to be a character reference for you. And Charlie loved you so much. You were always there for Charlie. And I know how much he leaned on you for apologetics and for thinking through these deep issues, around when he was on Bill Maher recently. And, you've meant so much to him, and your work at Cross Examine. Like, you are a dear brother and a dear friend. And some of that garbage, like, I don't even pay any heed, but I know you you were there the day that it happened. I know this has been terrible for you too, and you've had to deal with all this garbage, but God bless you. And I'm sorry that has been something in your experience.
Thanks, brother. I mean, that actually hasn't bothered me all that much, to tell you the truth. I just think it's so colossally stupid that if somebody wanted to shoot somebody, they'd need a guy standing 25 feet from him to signal, hey, get him. He's the guy. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense at all. So it was just a terrible day, but we all did the best we could to try and help and save Charlie. And then once we couldn't, all we could do was take Erica's lead and your lead, Andrew, and Mikey's lead, because you were all there, to march forward and take his legacy to new levels. And Lord willing, that's what's going to happen.
Well, Frank, you're going to be a key part of that. And, I joke with Erica. I'm like, Erica, he left us all the keys. He had all the people that we needed, all the reference points, all the true allies, not the snakes, not the grifters, the true people. And you are a true man, and you have great character, and you have great heart, and you've been a great friend to Charlie and to us. So,
thank you, brother. As you
wish
have
I could
to
say
me,
it 1,000 times over.
Thank you. But let's just do whatever we can to advance this legacy now.
And that, you mentioned it, Erica, and me and Tucker were just talking. We want to talk about Erica a little bit here.
Yeah.
And so we have to go to a radio break, but we're gonna keep going for the stream. And so hang right there with us. The great Tucker Carlson, Charlie's dear friend, is with us, and we're so honored by it. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. Do you want to hit?
I do that because there've been reference. I know that a lot of stuff going on online. I've checked out, actually. Just want to say that because it's too upsetting to me. I know it's extremely upsetting for you guys since you're way more in the middle of it than I am. But obviously you need a fair, impartial, well-explained investigation that assures everyone the rule of law lives in the United States. I think it's essential, and I hope that we get it. I think we're going to have to push for it. We should push for it. But as to what happened, again, totally fair in my view to ask sincere questions. But I think it's important to remember the big picture, which is whatever happened, it was a species of the same phenomenon, which was the fight of evil against good. And his murder was an attempt to extinguish the light, period. And it didn't work. Like, that's the main thing to know. There are lots of things I want to know. And again, we have a civil system that has to go through a process in order for this government to continue, or any government. It has to be transparent and motivated by good faith, and it has to try to affect justice. That's a key, and I don't think we should blow past it. However, again, big picture, this is light versus dark. And you feel the darkness all around us. It comes in many different forms and many different guises. These are disguises, okay? But what it really is the age-old, it's the Lord of the earth. It's Satan. Sorry to say that. It is. Deliver us from the evil one, I think is the actual translation in the Lord's Prayer. And the evil one is all around us. But Charlie's murder is a reminder that we are surrounded by God and God's protection and God's love. And that is so obvious. The light has not only not been extinguished, it's glowing brighter. I hate like dumb metaphors like that, except this one is totally real. And so I speak for myself, I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on the big picture while demanding a precise accounting. That is legitimate. But I'm not going to get so caught up in that stuff that I miss the true message, which is forces of darkness tried to extinguish the light, and not only did they fail, their effort was counterproductive. That is the truth.
Frank, I was just sorry. I was sort of wrapped by what you were saying.
Sorry, I felt that. I felt it coming up. I couldn't keep it down.
It was beautiful. I was looking for somebody else to respond here quickly.
Well, let me mention something related to that. Our mutual friend James Lindsay had a text exchange with Charlie. In fact, he sent it to me the other night because I was speaking at a university here in North Carolina on Wednesday night about Charlie. And I related this story. And let me just read you what James sent to Charlie and what Charlie sent back. Very astute response by Charlie. James said, and this is August 24th, 2023, communism is by far the best evidence in support of Satan's existence. Charlie writes back, 100%. And then the next text, he writes back, if there is a Satan, then there is a God. And James writes back, that would follow. So evil actually shows that God does exist, not that he doesn't, because there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed, because in any objective sense, the only way you can define good is God's nature. Otherwise, everything's a matter of opinion. You couldn't say murder was really objectively wrong unless there's a standard of objectively right that we're all obligated to obey. And what we mean by that is God's nature. And as Tucker pointed out earlier, our founders understood that. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created and endowed by their government. No, it doesn't say that. Endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, we saw it 8 days ago, then God exists.
Well, and that is honestly the way that a lot of us were convinced of the reality of God was by being forced to acknowledge the reality of evil. I can say that for myself. My wife, who's like the person who keeps our family text chain grounded in the truth, sent a verse this morning that basically said that exact thing. And there are a number of them throughout both Old and New Testaments, as you know better than I, but that say that God will use evil for his purposes and that he will reveal himself through sadness as well as joy. And that is practically true. It's not even a theoretical concept. It's a living concept for those of us who concluded just on the basis of the evidence that these were not political differences, actually. These were not political phenomena. These were a bunch of different things. I won't get specific, but you know what I'm talking about. This is the face of evil. And that brought us to the reality of God. It's like wild. That actually happened. It happened to me.
I'm loving all of this because it's making my head spinning. So let's take a quick 15-second break, and then we'll welcome back radio.
That's a short ad.
All right, welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. I want to say one thing about, I want everybody to know, and I know, Blake, you've been contemplating this too, but Charlie was willing to give the very last measure of his effort in his life. He really was, and he said it multiple times, and I think the first time he said it on stage, it wasn't something that was planned, it came out of him naturally, and Erica heard it, and Erica was like, "You be careful when you say that, please," and that's really powerful, but he said it again and again. He said it on a Lance Wallnau show, I remember one time, saying like, and he was very aware of the story of Stephen. He was very well aware of the prophets, and he was very well aware that people that wanted to hurt him, and it never stopped him. And I think we need to remember that when we think about evil and we think about, because death, where's your victory? Oh, death, where's your sting? It's the last thing that, it's like you said, they meant it for evil, but the Lord is taking it and he's turning it to good and for the saving of many lives. And I always was caught by that wording in the scriptures, the saving of many lives. Obviously he's talking about the Israelites in that instance, but as we contemplate it for our own moment, the saving of many lives. And I think about all these baptisms and all these reports of the churches being overflowing and across the country. And we didn't riot, Tucker. We didn't burn businesses. We didn't tear down windows and doors. We prayed. And that is the biggest, most amazing testament to the character of Charlie Kirk.
Well, but it's also the nature of, or it has been my experience anyway, I'm not a theologian, but I just will say that I've had many moments, especially in the last 10 years, where, you can feel it around you, like for real. You can feel the menace, you can feel the hate, you can feel the threat. It comes out of nowhere. I've had a couple pretty intense experiences with it, very intense. And they are followed invariably by the peace of God, by the Holy Spirit. And you know that God is using this moment for your benefit, your edification, and your joy. That is true, that out of tragedy, and it's such a cliche, and it's such a kind of syrupy, hallmark, false assurance on the surface that I hesitate even to say it, but I've just lived it so much. I've lived it so much. That is absolutely how God has communicated with me in my life, like directly, is by contrasting his presence with the evil that you feel around you. And so it is, in a weird way, in the middle of tragedy, like a true blessing. And if you see a loved one, we all go through this as we age. I've been through it a lot recently, where someone you really, really love dies. And then you're just filled with this sense of the presence of God that's absolutely real. You're not manufacturing it. It's not like a immune response or something. It's like a presence from outside coming into you. And I think the whole country feels it, or the people who are alive to it feel it now strongly.
In fact, the greatest evil of all time, the sacrifice of Jesus, has led to the greatest good.
Yes.
Without the sacrifice of Jesus, we'd all be dead in our sins. But Christ was sacrificed so that our punishment could be put on him. And when we trust in him, we're not only forgiven, but we're given his righteousness. There's a misunderstanding among some. They think in order to get to heaven, I got to be good. No. There's nobody good enough. Jesus said there's nobody good but one, and that was him. But in order to get to heaven, you need to take his sacrifice and apply it to yourself. You need to take the punishment that went on him, and you trust in him to get that forgiveness because your punishment was put on him. And then by trusting in him, you're not only forgiven, you're given his righteousness. So good works are a result of Christianity. They're not the cause of Christianity. The cause of Christianity in someone's life is to trust in what Christ has done, and out of love for what Christ has done, then you'll do good works. Well, by the way, I'm really struck by a quote from Peter Kreeft, who said this about what evil can do in our lives to help us become more like Christ. He said this. He said, "The point of our lives is not comfort, security, or even happiness, but training. Not fulfillment, but preparation. This world is a lousy home, but it's a fine gymnasium."
Well, Frank, I just want to say again, I know you've got to catch a flight here, so God bless you, my friend. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being such a rock in Charlie's life. I'll say it, you don't have to give them any heed. I'm sorry about the conspiracy theories, specifically around you and some of my other friends that were around the table. They're utter garbage, and we stand by you 100%, my friend. And just thank you for being just an amazing guy, and you meant so much to Charlie, and we'll see you in a few days.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Blake.
Thanks, Frank.
God bless you guys.
Thank you. All right. I have a clip of Charlie talking exactly about what we're talking about, and we're going to play it in about 5 seconds.
Nice.
So Charlie was very well aware of the existence of evil, obviously. So were us on his team. There's by the way, just one other conspiracy theory I just want to snuff out here. One of our dear friends that literally from the very beginning started with us and loved Charlie like a brother, he grabbed the SD cards out of the camera afterwards. And there's all these conspiracy videos about why did he grab the SD cards? Well, first of all, they're in the possession of the FBI. Okay. It's not like he took them and like ran off with them. Second of all, I asked him personally, I said, why did you do that? And he looked at me and this was his answer. He said, because I know people can be evil. And he did not want that footage being grabbed by somebody. There was videos of people after the incident going and stealing hats off the table. I mean, so I'm so grateful he did that. And that was his instinct. He's like, I'm depressed to know that was why I did that. But I knew that I had to protect that footage because I wanted, you're recording in like 4K, And so I'm so glad he did that. But Charlie knew the existence of evil. And
can I say, I think that people can feel the existence of evil, and that just to put in a sympathetic word for people who are trying to make sense of this and coming to the wrong conclusions, I think they're motivated for the most part by pure intent. I think they don't trust the authorities. They have every reason to feel that way. I know that for a fact. Not the Trump administration, in general. Like, we're not, there's been a lot of lying, and it's corroded the trust. That's not their fault, actually. They're the victims
That's a
of
good
it.
point. Thank you for saying that.
Either, of course, bad actors who are doing it for clicks or whatever, but I guess, but there are far more people who love Charlie. They loved what he stood for. They feel like he was murdered by evil. They're absolutely right. They're not sure what variety of evil. There's no authoritative person to tell them. So I guess I'm just not surprised that this is a message I've told to a lot of people. This is what happens when you lie too much and you hide too much. And going forward, I just want everybody with power to be honest in the way that Charlie was honest about themselves. That will do more than anything to fix this, to make people love each other and hear each other. And if people are honest, we got here because of lying. And the only antidote is truth. And so truth about yourself, not about other people. Stop talking about other people. Admit who you are. And once you do that, people can feel that. And they immediately, as they do with Charlie, they respond to it. They're like, I believe you because you're honest about you. Anyway, I want that.
Yeah, a buddy of mine just said something that I think is really profound. He said, two people, and I believe this about you too, Tucker, which is why you're so important, but two people could say the same thing. Imagine Charlie Kirk, 30 million followers across social media, and somebody else also very prominent.
Yes.
And they would say the same thing, but when Charlie said it, it would echo and ripple across the world.
Yeah, because we're all animals, by the way. And so much of what we know, we receive non-verbally. We can smell each other. We can feel the vibe. I don't care if that sounds flaky. It's true. My dogs can do it, and so can you. And if a deceptive man is speaking, I don't believe what he says, even if it's factually accurate. And if an honest man is speaking, I know it. I can feel it. That's why everyone loves Blake, despite his eccentricities.
You're honest.
He is honest.
Yeah.
He's not a liar. And Charlie was the same. And we just know that. You can't dissuade me of that. I know that's true.
Let's go ahead and play cut 20. This is Charlie talking about the existence of evil revealing God's presence.
As Christians, ethical monotheists, we have the problem of evil. Atheists have evil, no problem. On the atheist side, they can't say that evil actually exists because without God, if God does not exist, then we are nothing more than just a clump of cells and there is no such thing as evil. You only know something is evil if you have good to compare it to. If I have a piece of paper and I draw a crooked line, how do you know this line is crooked? You immediately look at it and say, that's a crooked, squiggly line. Only because in your mind, you know what a straight line is. If you don't believe in God, then you say evil's no problem. But if you are upset with it, you actually are implying that you believe in God. You might be angry at God. You might be wrestling with God. You might think that God is unjust. That's a completely different thing than not believing in God.
There's no one who doesn't believe in God. Everyone believes in God because the Spirit of God is within us because he made us. The divine spark exists whether you acknowledge it or not. So your options are three. Either you acknowledge it and try to live by it, you ignore it and numb yourself, or you rage against it. And so that would be the atheists, the agnostics, and the Christians in reverse order. And you can see them immediately. The agnostics are numb, the atheists are enraged, and the Christians have peace. But you don't have any other options because it's just real. It pre-exists to you, and every single person feels it.
Welcome back, radio. All right, welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. Andrew Colvett, executive producer of the show. My good friend Blake Neff, another producer of the show, and of course the great, good friend, wonderful man. Honestly, Tucker, thank you so much for making the time.
My honor.
By the way, everything we've asked of you, you just said whatever I can do. Yes, I'll clear my schedule. Yes, absolutely, and that's just how you are, and I love that about you.
Well, I want to get on the road. I mean, my favorite thing that Charlie did in his professional life was get out and physically speak to people in their physical presence. I think that's so important. I love the internet, I guess. I'm pretending to love the internet. I hate it. But mostly I love being with people physically and smelling them. And he was like the last person who really loved that. And he got murdered. And I grieve his death, of course. But I also am really concerned that whole thing will die. Yeah. It's so important to be there physically. Like, ask me anything in my physical presence. And so I'm doing that for you guys. I'll do as much as you want because I just really believe in that.
Well, we were going to save that for Monday, but so they announced
I'm not much of a planner.
But yeah, so
well,
breaking news.
If you guys want me to go out there, I will do it.
Yeah, breaking news here. Tucker Carlson will be a part of continuing Charlie's legacy by touring with us.
Wherever you want.
It'll be at least one stop. We'll say it like that.
During grouse season. And so that's like the ultimate expression of love. Talk about laying down your life. I love grouse season.
Take up your cross daily. So I want to pivot this conversation to Charlie's wife.
Yes.
Erica Kirk. And I joked yesterday, on Dot Crime, I got a little, you guys razzed me about it, but I was quoting Blake, and because it came out, it was just this like amazing thing, and I should know better than to air private conversations publicly, but Erica was referenced, and Blake just goes, "What a woman."
Dude, she's unbelievable.
She's amazing.
I was in Phoenix, flying to Phoenix for something else, and Charlie texted me on the plane and said, I heard you coming to Phoenix because he knew everybody. I was like, how do you know that? He goes, do you have time for lunch? Yes. I had nothing to do with him. I was not here for Turning Point at all. And so I meet him at lunch with his girlfriend, Erica, and he wants me to introduce me to her. And I called Susie, my wife, after, and I was like, because my longstanding view has been, it's critical. Like, I really believe in marriage, but not for like syrupy reasons. Like, I think it really matters. And I was like, that chick is a star. I mean, she was just like, no, this is what's true. And that's not true. I mean, she is, tough is not exactly the right word because it's from love. It's from Christian faith. It's from faith in Jesus. But it like, oh man, oh my gosh, unwavering.
And you want to know a crazy?
I love that.
You want to know a crazy thing I just realized last night? So Andrew Breitbart dies in 2012.
March 1st.
That inspires Charlie Kirk to start Turning Point USA in 2012. Guess what else happened in 2012? And we talk about people getting prepared and these little like nuggets that you think, I just realized this. Erica Kirk won Miss Arizona in 2012 and hung out with Donald Trump in 2012 because of that.
I know.
And so I don't know. There are no coincidences, and but you can just see how God was preparing them. And Erica as well. Erica grew up with a single mom.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, you wanted Charlie's kids to know their father in a deep and profound personal way. But Erica is uniquely, even in the midst of that tragedy, is uniquely able to navigate that, even just conceptually and emotionally. Something I've talked to her about, and it's powerful, even hearing her as she's working these pieces out. And I don't want to share too much privately. So they said this publicly. And I just love it. And I shared this on Twitter, X, the other day, and it went viral. So let's go ahead and play cut 19, one of my favorite interactions between Charlie and Erica.
My wife joins us, Erica Kirk,
Hi,
the beautiful,
everyone.
legendary Erica.
I love you so much.
I love you.
You're my best friend.
Welcome to the Charlie Kirk Show. We have asked the audience for questions. You pick one.
Who is more conservative and why?
Erica,
Yes.
by far. Not even close. I am a moderate compared to Erica.
Andrew always jokes that once you got married to me, you got more based.
That's true. That is true. No, Erica is very conservative. Do you
So-
think having kids made you more conservative?
100%. Which I didn't think was possible. But 100%. Absolutely.
And do you
And a
think-
better wife.
Boy, that's the realest thing ever. It's hard to talk about your marriage because no one believes you. But of course, because it's like it's your wife, you can't say anything bad. But like, I just know for a fact that that's true.
It's really true.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I should note, because I can't control myself, that there was a picture of them in Maine, which they loved. That makes me sad.
Yeah. Well, Charlie was bad at vacations.
Yeah, terrible at vacation.
So he was in Maine this summer on vacation, and I just loved how it kept like, oh, well, okay, Fox and Friends wants me to be a guest, so we're going to take the weekend, like the best days of the vacation, where he could actually maybe, and Erica was just totally game for it. She was like, cool, let's go to New York.
No,
That's
they
fine.
came to my house, and he's like, I want to buy a house here. I was like, oh, got to. The state needs you. It's good. And
It's-
I'm sorry that they didn't. But
It's just been amazing to hear her talk about, not just their relationship, but like how they both viewed marriage. And what you're saying, the last exchange I had with Charlie by text message just on the way to the event, he was
I was on
Blake,
that text
what are the best arguments for monogamy? And it gets back to that, the Christian civilization stuff we talked about, because he loves all the takes I'd give him, where I'm like, Christian marriage is in the Bible, but it's also this like secret weapon that made the West great, and like countries that follow Christian marriage, like they're amazing, they excel, they improve, they get better, they have
is true.
harmony between men and women far more than any other civilization. He loved all of that, and so I was rattling all that off, and I think the last thing I got from him is he like hearted a list that I posted, and 10 minutes later he was on the stage.
Yeah,
And-
those. I've looked back at those because I was on that text chain and I was chiming in, and they were the last texts that I exchanged with them too, and it was like 30 minutes before it happened, and yeah, we were talking about marriage.
that is
And
wild.
when they
fitting.
talk about, hearing Erica talk about it, where she'll say stuff that sounds unbelievable to you. She's like, people would ask me, did you get mad at Charlie because he traveled so much and was doing so many things? And she's like, no, I didn't. And it was because we were on the same team. We were on the same mission. And I would have never wanted to in any way be hindering from him executing God's mission. And he would have never wanted to fail in any way in me executing the mission God gave me.
But but when he was present, he practiced Shabbat not because he's Jewish, but because he needed sort of a discipline to follow. And so from sundown on Friday, really all of Saturday, it was like he was off. He turned, you couldn't call him, you couldn't get a hold of him. I mean, there was ways if an emergency happened that I could get a hold of him.
And it was legit.
But it was legit.
You'd see the wave of him like reading the things you sent on like Friday night or
But
Saturday
then he
morning,
started
and finally
blowing
reacting
you
to
up
them
on Sunday when I'm trying to go to church. All of a sudden, Charlie's back on, and it was just but he gave that time so purely and fully to his wife and kids, and Erica absorbed every moment of that. And I told this story yesterday, and I do want to like clarify something because apparently people took it the wrong way. But the night it happened, she got a call from a very important person, and that very important person, I'm not going to say who, it maybe isn't who you think, but it's a very important person, but asked like I just have to ask, like what do you know? And he wasn't talking about some conspiracy theory. They hadn't even got the shooter at this point.
It's a fair question.
He was asking, what do you know about Turning Point? What do you know about what Charlie was doing politically? What do you know about the donors? What do you know? Like, what are we working? What's our starting point here? And she said back, I know everything.
Thank God.
Because Charlie they would walk and they would talk and they would religiously, they would walk. Because Charlie hurt his back, he couldn't run anymore. He used to run like 7 to 10 miles a day. When I first started working with Charlie, he would just be gone running. And he hurt his back, he couldn't do it. So they would walk together. And if you ever walked with Charlie, the guy could keep a pace. The guy with big, long legs. And, and they would talk and they would lay in bed and they would talk. and she was his vault, and she knows everything.
She has the same spirit. So when that was announced, or I heard that she was taking over, I was just elated. It's not attacking anyone else, by the way, or a reference to any of the internecine battles currently going on, which I'm trying to not think about. It's just the fact, the provable fact that she had the same spirit and the same goals, the same mission that he had. That is just true.
Just more based.
I just want it without, whatever, but getting into it, but I just want to affirm that. I just saw that recently, yet again, and I'm just so thankful that she's taking over, because it's a big deal. I saw Trump on Monday. He said I couldn't get elected without Charlie Kirk, and he's not prone to say things like that. He meant it.
Wow.
Yeah.
JD said the same thing with Jesse, and I know JD feels that, and it's just been amazing too to see Washington, the power center, the imperial capital, as Charlie always used to say. By the way, Charlie hated going to Washington, hated it. He loved being out here in Phoenix. Thought it was like our secret weapon. Well, besides you being the secret weapon, it was our secret weapon to be outside of that bubble, and yet somehow all of Washington is coming to him.
Can I say one thing? I shouldn't even get involved in this, but it's a fact, so I want to say it. He loved JD Vance. He loved Donald Trump, of course, often said it. He really loved
The stuff he would talk about in private, and some of that would bubble out. He loves telling the story of the first time he endorsed him for office. And in case people haven't heard it, it's such a great story where Vance has announced he's running in Ohio for Senate, and it's a very long shot bid at this point. I think he polled at 2 or 3%.
Yeah,
he comes in, he meets Charlie, he talks to Tyler too, and they come out and they're like, he said everything we believe. Like we've got to endorse him. Like if we're not going to endorse this guy, why are we even here?
Exactly.
And they're basically like, they make that commit, and there's a miscommunication because it's a big open Senate, it's a big Senate race, and Charlie's got to call a lot of donors and explain why we're doing this. We're not going for your guy. This isn't a slight on you. Manage all the
other guy was their guy for
and
sure.
instead there's a miscommunication, and it just goes out like blast. Turning point is endorsing JD Vance, and it goes out way too early. And somebody's like, well, we all believe it. And he's just like, JD Vance is amazing.
And by the way, that you're part of that story because he saw JD on your show and was like, at that point he didn't know all the little deep things that he believed, and he kept. I remember him saying, JD's got like something. There's something about JD. He's got the goods. And before you explain why,
I'm not going to get involved in this.
No, but
just say he loved
JD.
Yep.
He loved. And by the way, JD loved him, and I think you can see that.
Yes.
We'll be right back.
So,
I just want to say, I don't think I can
show. Do you want to put a cap on that? I know you have a story to tell.
Well, I just want to. I don't think I can emphasize it enough. And again, I'm really going to try, because I think the point of Charlie's life was following Jesus. I just want to say that again, as someone who knew him well. I think the point of his life was following Jesus. So I really want to be helpful to that mission and not get distracted with the other stuff. And I have distracted with the other stuff for sure, because I feel strongly about it. But I'm going to try and stop. But I just want to say, if you want to understand Charlie Kirk, he loved JD Vance and Donald Trump, but he was genuinely close to JD, like as a friend, and vice versa. And that is just factually true. And I don't want to hurt anybody by going on, but that's true.
And JD earned every
yes,
ounce
he did.
Of that. And
he loved the story, and it really meant a lot to him. So we had that event in
it was in June in Detroit.
In Detroit, the People's Convention, we called it. I assume that was like
it was pre him getting announced as VP, and they were just starting to kind of like float his name out there.
Yeah, which Charlie, of course, very much wanted to do, and he used all of his political talents to try to promote that. And one of those things is invite him to the convention. And what he always loved about it was, I think it was his anniversary, either the day before or the day after. And so
it was the day before, because we wanted him on Saturday night to be sort of the final speaker on Saturday night, and he said,
and Charlie would love that. He's like, it's my anniversary.
I can't.
He would say, marriage
I have
comes
to be
first.
with my wife, but I will commit to getting there on Sunday. And Charlie was like, great, you can be the final speaker of the event, and that gave him just enough time to get
to literally just drive up there, which I believe he personally himself drive the car,
drove.
and he gets there, and we're used to a lot of people having entourages, and he just shows up. I think he had one aide with him.
This is JD.
Yeah. And he just walks in and it's just like, hey,
Will was with him.
I'm JD Vance. I'm a speaker. I think maybe some security guy didn't initially recognize him.
No, it's just JD Vance walking by himself backstage. I was like, I think that's JD. He's just kind of like strolling in, and like we found out he drove. He's like, oh yeah, I was just
There's never been a less affected politician. I always promise myself I'm not going to compliment JD Vance because I don't want to hurt him. But there's never been a less affected leader ever. Like period.
I totally agree. I've never seen one if there is. But yeah, Charlie. People would ask Charlie a lot. Are you going to run for president? Are you going to run for office? Or and he would always. You will not find one piece of content anywhere ever. It doesn't exist where he said, yeah, you know what, I want to be president someday. He would always say, I love what I'm doing. Like God called me here. We have more impact here. And that was all very true. Privately, I had that conversation with him, and I wouldn't say he answered it with me, although that maybe there were some other instances where I caught an inclination. But what he said was, JD's ready, and because JD's running, I don't even have to think about it. And I don't know if that's I don't know if he said, let me say, because JD exists, we're going to do everything we can. He didn't say that he, confirmed or anything, but because JD exists, I don't even have to think about it. And Charlie, was such a champion of JD's political talents and his future. And if JD does decide to do that, certainly Charlie would cheer him on from the hereafter. But Charlie has a lot of faith in JD Vance.
I always loved his frankness on just topics like that. In the 2024 primaries, he'd just come out and he's like, well, I promised Trump that if he ran again in 24, I would support him. So that was that. I made a promise.
Yeah. And if JD chooses to do that, then God bless him, and I would be here to cheer him on. we have our final radio segment of the day.
Are you serious?
It goes
That
fast.
went
doesn't it?
fast, yeah.
But I have this great clip of Charlie that we're going to play. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. This is Andrew Colvetz, the executive producer of this fine show. And we have Tucker Carlson, the great Tucker Carlson, the great Blake Neff here. And I'm going to play one clip. And then, Tucker, you're going to take us home. Okay? So play cut 2. This is Charlie talking about his lovely wife, Erica.
My wife is the best person ever, and she's a patriot, and she's a believer, and we don't want to have to be accountable to God when this life passes. And he asks, why did you not trust in me and not fight evil? Because we as Christians are called to fight evil. It's one of the lesser known scriptures, Psalm 97:10. For those of you that love God, you must hate evil.
Yep, amen.
And again, everyone is called to something different in the body of Christ. Some people are called to heal the sick. Some people are called to mend broken marriages. Some people are called to do outright hot gospel teaching. My call is to fight evil and to proclaim truth. That's it.
Who has that clarity of purpose, at that age? It's such a rare gift. I think it is a gift. It's not detracting from the choices that he made, but like he knew what his purpose on this earth was. He worked tirelessly to fulfill that. Tirelessly. I can't overstate that. As someone with a similar gig, like I've never seen a man work harder and with greater self-sacrifice, with greater self-discipline. And it all flowed from his belief that this is not pointless. There's a race that we have to run. And he left us in mid-stride. I thought that night, and I was heartbroken and struggling even now to control myself. Excuse me. But I had that image that day. I was on a plane when it happened of him going like that, leaving this earth in that position in mid-stride. And that is, as tragic and overwhelming as it is, that is such a gift. Like, may that be the end of my life too, and all of our lives, to leave in midst of purpose, in midst of forward motion. Very few people get that. And, in this case at 31, it's unimaginable. However, that is something that I know that I want. And I think that every person who thinks about it wants that too. And so I'm grateful for that.
Well, you have a special place in the Turning Point family, Tucker. I know you know that. You had a special place in Charlie's heart. And I just want to address one thing before we go here. We got like two and a half minutes left. That there was pressure put on Charlie, about you appearing at Turning Point.
Oh, you think?
And
he's such a Scot about it, so he's just like, you're putting pressure on me, so I've got to double down.
Yeah, he was like, some of the funny text messages that we found since then. He goes, "Oh, they don't want me to have Tucker. Oh, maybe I'll have him speak twice." And he just
he said
loved
those
you.
to me.
Yeah, he just loved you, and there was, and that was the hardest thing to explain to people that maybe didn't like your views on foreign policy or whatever.
Didn't like my views on foreign policy.
I'm trying to be diplomatic here, Tucker.
I thought I should
embrace it.
put in prison. Yeah,
embrace it. Embrace it. But I just, Charlie. This was the hardest thing to explain is that, like, guys, you don't understand. Like, Charlie's mission is 3 steps down. He's keeping a coalition together. He's keeping friends together. He's keeping networks together. He's a statesman, and he's not going to knee jerk and be morally blackmailed by anybody. And if you do it, he will double down. And you saw it in that clip. My mission is to confront evil.
Oh yes.
And to proclaim the truth
wherever it is. Yes.
And I would just tell people, listen, you might think one thing, fine. But Charlie and Tucker are deeply, deeply on a very personal level friends, and Charlie is loyal.
Oh, yeah.
And if you go down this route, don't be surprised when you have Tucker having 3 speeches on 3 different nights at AmFest.
When I was a kid, in high school, I drove my car into a white pine in Maine, going about 40. And I remember thinking, it totaled the car. And I remember thinking, wow, the tree just doesn't move. It doesn't matter how hard you hit it. And that was Charlie. He was just a towering white pine man. He was just not, it didn't matter how hard you hit him. He just wasn't moving. There's few things I respect more than that.
Well, Tucker, it's been a pleasure. One of my favorite shows, and I think it was so fitting that you capped off the week. And I know you're going to be speaking at his celebration.
About Jesus, not politics, to be clear. And I'm so glad that we could take some time to talk about Jesus, not politics, because that's the whole point.
Well, it's funny. When I first started being around you, the way you would talk about faith was much more reticent and reserved. And Charlie has made a convert out of you, and you are proclaiming the truth as well as any preacher I've ever heard. So thank you, Tucker Carlson.
Very much.
May God bless you.
God bless
May
you.
God bless the reach of your word.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
All right, hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective Podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing right now on Thursday afternoon. We've got a unique, something we've not done before type of podcast here today, which I'll explain in a minute. First off, joining me from Sacramento, California, Anthony Slater. What's up, Slater?
I'm doing great. You guys were just complimenting my backyard prior to this, so I'm feeling
You're really
good.
doing great because you're a Cleveland Guardians fan, and moments ago they just completed a sweep of the Tigers.
This is a very Cleveland podcast because Brian has obviously Cleveland ties, and you're about to get to our guest, Cleveland ties.
And actually, I am in Akron right now, so I just got to Northeast Ohio. Joining us is the president of Varus Basketball and the representative of Jonathan Kuminga, who's been in the news a little bit lately, Aaron Turner. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on Hoop Collective.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad we get to wrap.
Yeah, and you're joining us from Cleveland, which is where you live and where you're from. I'm here in Ohio. It's a beautiful day. We were just talking before we came on. You went to Orange High School, which is on the east side of Cleveland, and you played against LeBron James in high school and dominated him. From what I think that's what you just said. I'll let you clear the record, but I think that's what you said.
Far from that, but I did get. He got one foul when he played against us. It was against me, so I have that.
So he fouled you.
Fouled me.
Those are stats now, right? You can find in the box score, like Drew, how many personal fouls drawn.
Oh, there, it's in the archives. He just couldn't move his feet quick enough. So
yeah, that was on his scouting report.
He's the only high schooler I've ever seen get a foul called, be able to run down to the other side of the floor, put his hands up in the air, and it was like, oh, no tech, don't worry about it, come back down.
I've seen more than one high school kid get. Okay, so but before we get into the business here, what I like is this great story. There was one game, LeBron's senior year. It was a senior year, right?
Yeah.
So you're a year younger than LeBron.
We
You were
played
class-
him. He was depends what junior year we played him at the Kent Fieldhouse game we were talking about.
Okay, so your junior year, his senior year, right? Because you're younger.
That was his junior year. It was right when that Sports Illustrated cover came out.
Oh, right. Okay, so the Sports Illustrated cover comes out. Here's the thing: the Lakers have an off night in Cleveland.
Mhm.
They are the defending champions. They are in the. I think that year maybe they won their third of three-peat. So they are the two-time champs. They have an off night in Cleveland. LeBron is playing St. Vincent St. Mary. Go Irish.
Yep.
Our football team hasn't scored a point yet. It's like 4 weeks into the season. I'm just going to bring that up. I'm sorry to say. They're playing in Canton. Canton from Cleveland is what, Aaron? An hour. Okay, and it's February, right?
Mm-hmm.
So middle of the winter, the Lakers have an off night. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. How many nights do you think that they spent together on off nights? Do you think that they hung out a lot on off nights during that time? Okay, they get in the car, drive an hour to Canton to watch you guys play. Kobe and Shaq show up at your game. Like you're playing against LeBron, who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated like a couple of days before, and Kobe and Shaq at their height, well, maybe not Kobe's height, but certainly Shaq's height, show up at your game. What the heck was that? What were you guys saying on the bench when that went down?
I remember that. It was our coach it was during a timeout. He was drawing up nobody could hear him. I mean, you couldn't even hear it. It was the loudest I'd ever seen an arena. And the Canton Fieldhouse where it was the way it's built, 5,000 people packed in. I mean, you couldn't hear anything that anybody was saying for the next 30 seconds.
Because they were like fashionably late, like they came in like
yeah. And it was so loud and it was in a timeout and no one had any idea what our coach was saying.
That is amazing. I mean, that's kind of freaky, man, right? I mean, just to see Shaq in person, you never get used to it.
Yeah, no, it's all very wild.
All right. Well, the reason you're here is because you're in the middle of the most intense negotiation going on in the NBA right now. And I will tell you, this is my 23rd year covering the NBA. I can't speak with, confidence about the 90s, but in my 23 years covering the NBA, this might be the toughest summer for a restricted free agent that we've seen. And if it's not the toughest, it's right up there. It's not worth arguing over. There was only a couple of teams with cap space. None of them were interested in giving out offer sheets. I think there was only one offer sheet that's been given out this summer, and it was like given out by the Hawks for like a couple $1 million. It was not a material offer sheet. And for the 3 or 4 big name restricted free agents, it was like kind of like a nuclear summer. Like it was going to be, which you knew, right? Like going in, it wasn't like this is a surprise. You knew. So you were facing a tough situation, and you're representing a player in Jonathan Kuminga, who is still ascendant in his career. He is, I think you would agree, has not achieved his max that he can achieve. So even if he's unrestricted, or even if there's a ton of cap space out there and you're negotiating with 4 or 5 different offer sheets, negotiating for a player like this is challenging because you're betting on him rising up. So we have a situation that I will say, you don't have to use the words, I'll say it. It's one of the most challenging markets for a restricted free agent, with arguably the most, Josh Giddey was kind of in the same boat, same sort of challenge. But he had been at least a more established starter this last season. So you have gone through this, what I would assume is a pretty stressful summer, and it's still going on. And so how did we get here to where we're on September 18th and you still in this stalemate with JK and the Warriors?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's well said. And it has been a brutal year for any restricted free agent, any even free agent in general outside above the mid-level. It's the high-end free agent market this year is basically, it doesn't exist. It's not open. So that challenge has been there. We knew it was going to be there. But we're really in this place, now with less than 2 weeks away from training camp. And I know Slater's been tracking this the whole summer and before even, July 1st, when things could start talking with the Warriors and whatnot. This is a interesting pattern. And I've had a lot of people talk to me about the other restricted free agents or what's going on. And each one kind of has its own unique set of circumstances, and this one is very unique. The combination of how they finished, Jimmy coming in, Steve's, having a hard time figuring out the combinations that would work with JK on the floor. Steve openly stating that many times as he, and also after the season. And then JK's developmental arc and what he's looking to do and, where he wants to go. All these things have made this very, very challenging outside of, of course, no free agent market, but us finding a deal with them. So that's why we are sitting here now 2 weeks away. And like I was laughing, before we got on, Jonathan's in Cleveland with me working out. That's not normally how my September goes. I'm normally relaxing, taking my
Everybody
kids.
knows that Cleveland is the hub of the NBA offseason. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why I'm here.
Everybody comes here. That's right. No, but that's kind of our, we had scripted. Normally he's, going to be in Miami and then he goes back to the Bay or wherever team he was going to be. And we kind of just threw this together last minute and said, hey, let's give him, a good infrastructure in Cleveland. So he's got everything he needs here and he's working and, we're doing the best we can to simulate games and keep him, ready to go and in shape. Even if that means, he doesn't report till October 1st, we want him to be ready and in great shape.
So there's so much pretext to this, obviously, but speeding it up for the moment. We know the offers. We've reported the offers that are sitting there on the table: 3 for 75 with the team option, 3 for 54, I believe, no options, and then the one that's been sitting there most of the summer, 2 for 45, 1-1 team option on it. I am of the belief at this point that y'all are not that misaligned on per year value. Obviously, you went on the record with me a couple of days ago talking about if that team option and the 3-year deal, and you could even speak to it, maybe even in the 2-year deal, if that team option was a player option, it's not only signed, but you have a bought in Jonathan coming at that point. Why is the player option the final hurdle here, and why is it being I guess negotiated as strictly right now between the two sides?
So I'm gonna kind of go back to last summer a little bit because I think if we're gonna we could go back to the first year of JK. We could go back to the with the JK Steve dynamic. We could go to year 2 where in March and February, March up to early April, JK was a big part of them getting into the playoffs. Even in that year they played the Kings when Wiggins was dealing with some personal issues and whatnot. And he averaged 13 and a half a game and really was really efficient. I think his true shooting percentage was like 64% during that time period. And then kind of falling back again during the playoffs as the rotation tightened, and then going into year 3 where he had 20-25 game span where he was phenomenal. He was, Draymond was saying, this guy's never going to not be an all-star. Enjoy your last all-star break, JK, because you're going to be an all-star the rest of your career. So there's a lot of things leading up to last summer where, do we get something done? And I know there's been a lot of conversations and, about what happened last summer. And I'm bringing this all to get to your points later of like why we are now the player option, all that. But, the Warriors, they didn't want to do a deal last summer. I know people have reported, did you guys turn down 5 years, 150? We would have taken that. We would have had to take that if it was on the table, but it wasn't on the table. And no one was mad about it. It was the Warriors wanted to maintain flexibility. Had they given JK pretty much anything above 20 million, they would have, even above the mid-level, to be honest with you, they would have not been able to move him. That poison pill provision that would have said, hey, if you trade him out, that team has to take him back at his 25, 26 salary. They would have no chance to get a Kevin Durant like they almost did last year with JK being the centerpiece. So that was the choice they made. They didn't want to do a deal. Again, no one was upset about that, but we went into this year or last season, hoping that there would be kind of more of an opportunity to figure this all out. And JK had moments where he was given a long runway, end of December, early January, and really flourished. But there was a lot of ups, downs, and that's kind of been the theme. In year 4, there was one moment where it was like, hey, we're passing the torch to JK. This is his time. He was coming off a big 33-point game.
Draymond Green accepted a bench role. If people might remember for a few games, and they basically kind of announced if he's up next, we got to see it. That was during that time.
And it lasted a few games, and then he was back coming off the bench, and it was very frustrating. So and in that month in December, he averaged 21 points, 6 rebounds. He was really, really good. So then unfortunately, and the Steve JK dynamic was really flourishing, and JK gets this really bad ankle sprain, which was unfortunate because, like I said, that was to me the high point of Steve and JK. They were really doing well. Everything was vibing. And then again, he gets hurt. Jimmy comes in. Jimmy was phenomenal. And we get to this point where we're now in this weird spot where obviously they committed a bunch of money to Jimmy. Everyone understands that. But now it's like, where do we go? And it's funny, I always say this about the NBA with my guys: like, you don't get too high, you don't get too low, because when something happens, you don't know necessarily if it's good or bad. But when Steph got hurt against Minnesota and JK filled in, he had a great series. I thought he played really well, and I was happy for him in the sense that getting DNPs and stuff that was going on in Houston, he got to show that. But it probably made all this a lot harder, even because Joe was sitting courtside watching JK.
Joe Lake of the Warriors. I'm just in case it's your guys' life. I just have to fill in.
Yes.
Fill in. People got to figure out who Jimmy is, but just to be clear.
Right. So Joe Lake, he's sidelined and he's watching JK, shred essentially one of the best defenses in the league. After All-Star break last year, and I think he finished averaging 21 a game that series, 54 from the field, 42 from 3. And so it's like, okay, we get to the summer. This guy's clearly got some talent. Where are we going with this? And that's why we're in this spot of this confusion of where do we go from here? And I think that's kind of moved this summer. And so when you get to the player option, the kind of the way we look at it and have approached this from day one, there's been a lot of stuff I've heard. JK doesn't want to be with the Warriors. Like, we can unpack that a little bit. I think JK is the hardest worker I've ever represented. From a 1 to 10, his work ethic is an 11. He loves it. He's competitive. I've kind of said this about him. His biggest flaw sometimes is he wants it too much. So he's gotten a chance to hear from other teams. Sacramento, he spent some time with them, got to meet Scott Perry, Doug Christie, the Suns, and what they've offered him. And there's been other teams too who, maybe planting seeds for 26, 27, but saying, hey, we want you to be you. We don't want you to change anything. We want to put the ball in your hands. We want to give you a huge opportunity to play. So I don't think it's more about not being on, not wanting to be on the Warriors, because the Warriors, if having rep guys on all different teams, it is first.
They want you to be you. What exactly is that? What has he done?
class as you get. I mean, everything there is awesome, from the facility, how they treat the guys. It's like amazing. But these other places are offering them opportunities to start games, finish games, right? Know your role. We don't want you to change anything. We want you to continue to develop, spread your wings. So with Golden State, it's not a secret, right? JK's, and Slater, you made this point the other day on ESPN, no guarantee he starts any games. He may, but we don't know. Finishing games night to night, who knows? It depends if Steve has a combination he likes and it's working. Maybe he sticks with it. Maybe he doesn't. You're going to have to not have the ball as much. You're going to have to stay away from developing certain parts of your game or wanting to lean into certain part of your game, especially shooting any type of mid-range jump shots, which is something JK does work on. But in the Golden State offense and the role he's in, that's not going to be a big shot that he's really going to be able to take much. So part of it is you're going to have to sacrifice your game from where other people would allow you to do for now his 5th year. In addition to that, he might get traded. He knows that. We know that. They know that. I mean, we went in exploring all options. Myself, Mike Dunleavy, can we find a sign and trade that works? Can we duck around this base compensation rule that only allows them to bring back half the money? But he knows it's a real thing. You may get traded. And I really can't find where I've seen a free agent at 20 million above where you sign and go, I know I'm going to get very good.
I 100% agree. It's very rare. It's very
right.
rare.
And I've said that. So he doesn't want to move 3 months from now. He doesn't want to take his pack up his life and move. So there's the dynamic of sacrificing your game. There's the dynamic of moving halfway through the season.
And mid-season trades for players, Brian, you've been around, are a lot different than off-season moving teams. When you have to pack up in the middle of the season, players want to know, I'm going to be here. It's why the trade deadline, everyone, is so antsy about. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so we look at, the sacrifice of his game. We look at that. And then, these other teams, Matt Ishbia, who's openly, he would give JK whatever he could if he had the cap space. He's trying to figure it out through a sign and trade. And JK's heard these conversations. So he knows what's out there. He knows the deals, the guaranteed money, the opportunity. So when you factor all that in, the thought is, okay, if we're coming back here and it's win now, this is Steph's probably last window to win. Help us out on the back end of the deal because we're going to be sacrificing what we just spoke about. And that's why the player option has been so pushed by us. And I give credit to JK. There's a lot said about him that he only cares about himself or scoring. It couldn't be farther from the truth. JK's not a guy that says, oh man, I scored 30, 25. He just wants to be a part of what's going on. He does, of course, want to have the ball more. He wants the ball in his hands, but he's not a guy that doesn't want to win. He wants to be part of that. And I, before we started this negotiation, I came to him and I've been educating him through this process, and he's learned a lot through this process. And I said to him, hey, look at the Warriors cap sheet. All right. They have some second apron issues. It's probably unreasonable to ask them to go over that. Even though we like Jalen Green's deal, we see Jalen Johnson's deal, 2 guys that we think were, hey, I'm not gonna say who's better, but okay, we see these deals. We like those numbers, but it's probably unrealistic here. And how are they gonna get the team better and bring you back? And we knew about the Al Horford, had heard about what was going on with Al. And to JK's credit, he said, look, I'll sacrifice for that. Give Al the taxpayer mid-level, comes in, it helps. We've never had a stretch 5 like that. Steve has said openly, having a stretch 5, some of the combinations that might loosen up the floor for the Jimmy, Draymond, JK dynamic. Maybe Al can really help with that. So, he was all on board with that. But because we were gonna take a number on the front that, we thought was maybe at a lower level than some of Jalen Green, Jalen Johnson, some of these other guys to help the team win in this window, then let us have the player option on the back end, and if JK, it's not that he wouldn't stay in Golden State, but if he wants to stay, he'd have the ability to stay. And if he doesn't, then okay, he's nothing's forcing him back to the table. So that's really, Slater, where the player option became important, because the way I look at it in a lot of deals, and I think this is a lot of businesses, it's, if you're going to take less on the front end, you get a little more on the back end. If you want more, on the front end, you're gonna get less on the back end. And in this situation, to help the team win, along with those kind of sacrifices we spoke about, we felt like that solution, and JK feels like it is fair. We think it's fair. We think it's the right thing to do. And listen, I get it's the NBA, and there's business and there's negotiations, and it's a lot of people say you can only, you're worth what you can negotiate. Okay, and I know that because I've been in a bunch of different negotiations. But in this situation, and people have said he has no market. There's no market. It's not that he doesn't have a market. The market is closed. Okay, it's closed. So if I have a Lamborghini and I'm in a bind, and I say to somebody, hey man, it's Saturday night. I need some cash for whatever reason. I wouldn't be in this situation, but I need some cash. It's a 911. I got to help my family, whatever that is. Monday morning, you can sell this car for $175,000. Can you give me that? And maybe this is a friend of mine or somebody that I do business with. Give me 175. Give me even 160. Go sell it for 175 on Monday. You'll get your return right out of it. They say, no, we'll give you 60 grand. Like, man, you can sell it Monday morning. The Lamborghini dealership will be open. And they say, nah, what do you want to do? Do you want to handle your emergency or not? This is what we're offering you. So the whole theory of like JK doesn't have a market, especially if the teams he's talking to, his market's closed. It's not open this year. To your point, right? It's the worst RFA market we've seen. There is no market. So that doesn't mean that a deal is fair or not fair to him just because the market is closed. And I've said from the beginning to Mike and the Warriors, you're not selling the basketball here. Steve, and I like Steve, I've known Steve Kirk since I was 5 years old. That's a whole nother story. It's a pretty wild, full circle thing back when we played with the Cavs, Brian. But, him and JK have had an up and down relationship. JK has flourished under Steve at times. I don't really buy the whole thing that JK can't play for Steve. I always say, when JK was scoring 25, 26 a game, who was on the sidelines? It was Steve. He can play under Steve. I know Steve at some points, and he made this very clear at the end of the season. I'd like a different type of player arc. He'll say he wants JK to be more like Aaron Gordon, Sean Marion. I don't agree with Steve on that side. I don't think JK is very much like those guys. I think they're different player arcs. I think JK's, just different. I'm not saying who's better, who's not, but Aaron Gordon's more playing off the ball. He's not as much of a point of attack defender. It's just that they're different. So Steve made it clear though, right? With Draymond, with Jimmy, the shooting, lack of shooting, it doesn't really, fit. So again, if he's going to come back to this, Mike, these other teams, right? Hey, JK, head coach is saying, we believe in you. We're excited to have you. We want you to be here and play your game. Sell the deal structure, because that's the Warriors' incumbent advantage, right? Over everyone else. They can sell the best deal. And that's where I thought we could bridge a gap.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the qualifying offer and the reasons why you guys are, saying you might take it at this point. Yeah. They would argue, particularly on the front end of the deal, they are offering more than theoretical Suns and Kings offers. And if you decide the team option deal is a no-go in the next 12 days, the one piece of leverage you clearly have in this negotiations in a restricted free agent market is taking the qualifying offer. Now that is 1 year, $7.9 million. It does come with unrestricted free agency. It does come with a no trade clause, but it also comes with, if you did the 1-1 that's been on the table all summer, like 13, 14 less million for Jonathan Kuminga next season. If you refuse the 2+1 with the team option, that's whatever. Do the math for me, somebody here, but we're talking about whatever it is, like 40 something guaranteed compared to 8. What is your view of the qualifying offer, and why are you willing to take it, or are you?
Yeah, well, you brought up a good point there. I pitched the player option deal, right, to give flexibility. We haven't said no to a team option. Our theory and feeling is, though, if you want a team option and you want to get rid of his no trade clause, which the QO inherently has, okay, that's a different price. You got to pay for that. Okay, you got to put more on top if you want both. I've also pitched, just before we get to taking the QO, hey, fine, we'll do the 1+1 scenario, but let him keep his no trade clause, which would put us in the same position we are right now, but with no base compensation rule. So JK at least has a seat at the table to figure out where he wants to go next, and you guys would have the back end of the deal, but they won't do that. So they've really tried to make a deal where they have no risk and are taking, to me, advantage of the situation of the market being closed. So JK, and why is the QO a real thing? If you know Jonathan, he has a lot of self-belief. He's very confident. I tell people all the time, and I tell the Warriors, look who you're dealing with. I don't know many people that could be getting DNPs in the playoffs, not play for 3 weeks, come into game 2 against Minnesota, make his first 9 shots, then go out the next night and have 30 points and 6 rebounds at his age, 20-some the next night, 29 to finish the series, and have that level of confidence and self-belief.
Yeah, and I would say, and Brian knows, there's a very wide range of belief around the league of how good Jonathan Kuminga can be. We may, on this call, have varying degrees. There's certainly, disproportionate, views within the organization, the Warriors organization, of how good he can be. But it is Aaron Turner and Jonathan Kuminga believe he's going to be a multi-time All-Star. He has that type of talent, and that is who the Warriors are negotiating with. A side that believes, once he does get control, once he does get a runway, that's where the takeoff is going.
Yeah, no, he believes that. I believe that. Our group around him believes that. We believe he's more about the right things than I think a lot of people think. I think some of the times people say, well, he took this shot or that shot that he shouldn't have taken. Playing with Steph, you have to really understand how to play with Steph, and it's something that's why I see a lot of vets really flourish in the role of understanding how to look for Steph first. And sometimes JK, he's 22, he's like, I can get downhill right away, and he won't. So he has a lot of self-belief. And
can I keep the question simple though? Like, he's willing to leave this much money on the table?
Yeah, my bad. Sorry, getting back. I was framing to why the QO.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing here, because we're talking straight dollars and cents here. They are offering a ton of money.
Yeah,
and he is saying, maybe I will not take that money.
Right. So when we look at these deals, one of the things he'll say to me is like, is this deal fair to me? And based on what we discussed, is it fair? No, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. I think that it's taking advantage of the circumstances, which for JK, that's not what he's looking for. So when you say, will he take the QO? He will take the QO. But if he's treated fairly, and in our mind, that's flipping, like I said, the TO to the PO, he's back. And then we don't have to talk about the QO. But the QO is real. It's something that, JK wants to take. It does have upside, right? We've talked about that. You're not getting traded. You're going to have unrestricted free agency in a year that even people say, well, Aaron, there's not going to be 10 or 12 teams. Fine. There'll be 6 teams with cap space for the clear cut, under 35, the top wing on the market. So there's a lot of upside if, he wants to pick where he wants to go, and the opportunity to be an unrestricted free agent in a way better market. So the QO is real. For sure. There's no, it's being considered completely. It's being talked about. We've, as your reporter said, we've gotten a disability policy out for him that would, hedge out some of the injury risk. But it's not something, anybody wants to do.
Neither side, Brian, this right clearly that we wouldn't be here on September 18th on this podcast discussing this if either side wanted that to be the outcome.
Yeah, I would just say, like, first off, Aaron, I really appreciate you coming on, because this is really a one-off situation. I can't remember where you're in the middle of a negotiation. You're willing to bring the fans in to hear this, because I'm telling you, there's incredible amount of interest in Jonathan's free agency, more than I can remember. Probably because he's on the Warriors, and partially because it's September and he's the number 1 free agent on the market. And there's
and the Warriors have signed nobody officially at this point.
Well, that's true. I do see a lot of people, like, why aren't the Warriors signing anybody? They're going to sign a bunch of guys. But I would just say that, having been around for a while, I just seen a lot of stuff. I've seen restricted free agencies going to December. I've seen teams have multiple restricted free agents that don't come to training camp. Okay, I've seen restricted free agencies end at the end of training camp. I've seen them end in the season. From my viewpoint, Aaron, and I totally get that you are absolutely eyeball deep in this. And because the thing about an agent does, like, a lot of stuff that people don't see. Your job is a lot deeper and more encompassing than just negotiating the contract. But your work product to the world is the contract. And not only that, everybody sees it. If you're a development coach, maybe you did a great job, or maybe you did a bad job, but nobody can necessarily see it. Maybe the player gets better, and it doesn't really reflect your work. In the case of an agent or representative, I'm trying to work out, not saying agent, I've been told that's bad. Your work product is what the contract is. So it's my way of saying I totally understand you are eyeball deep in fighting it. From my perspective, as a jaded guy who's been around for 20 years and seen a lot of this stuff, I feel like everybody is acting as normal here. I think the Warriors are trying to use their perceived leverage. They know that you can't get an offer sheet, so they're trying to squeeze you. I think if you were their general manager and the situation was reversed, well, I won't put that on you. I would just say if I was a general manager and the situation was reversed, I'd probably be trying to squeeze you too. In your situation, Aaron, what you've done is you've tried to flop the tables on that. Number one, you got offers from other teams. Okay, the Warriors don't seem interested in the sign and trades. That's cost of doing business. You can get sign and trade offers. If you can't do the deal, you can't do the deal. But based on Anthony and Shams Charania's reporting from this week, you've gotten them to increase their offer. Their offers now are better than they were a month ago. Mm-hmm. You've done your job. Okay, job's not finished, Kobe Bryant, what have you. They're coming up with their offers. They're offering more years and more money. They're dealing with the second apron. But I do think that, unless I'm wrong, you correct me if I'm wrong, they're offering more than either the Suns or the Kings have offered. Not because they don't want to offer more, but because they're limited in what they can do in the sign and trade. So they can look you in the eye and say, we're making a best offer. And they can look you in the eye and say, hey, we don't want to do a player option because we didn't give one to Steph. We didn't give one to Jimmy Butler last year. They did give one to Draymond, but Draymond, and correct me if I'm wrong, Slater, on this, Draymond did take a pay cut as part of this contract.
Yeah, he ripped up his player option, signed it at a lower number.
And I know just because
Andrew Wiggins got a player option too.
Oh, he did. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, they can look you in the eye and say that's why we didn't do it. If Steph doesn't get one, you don't be able to get one. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying what they could say. And I think everybody's doing their job here, Aaron. And I think you're working really hard, and the Warriors are working really hard. And in the end, I think it's interesting because of the possible trade. I think the Warriors, they wouldn't say it publicly, but I do think they're negotiating a contract not just to save Joe Lake of money and not just to protect their apron. I mean, both of those are true. I think they're working hard because they want to get a contract that's as tradable as possible. And I don't think they necessarily admit that, but I think all these things are in play.
No, it's been admitted. JK's a big boy. We know what it is. And I think, I have a lot of optimism if he comes back. And to Slater's point, people are worried about the buy-in, right? And I think buy-in, what does buy-in mean in this situation?
Yeah, they're worried that if he takes a qualifying offer, he's going to be checked out.
Or even, by the way, even if it takes a team, a deal that isn't the deal he likes, I think there's curiosity, especially again, as I reported the other day, is he going to be happy? And if he's not happy, what does that mean on the floor and in the locker room?
Yeah, I think that's and from the beginning, I've said this. I mean, every RFA situation is different, but the Warriors are trying to win. And anybody who's watched the Warriors closely understands JK is a massive piece. I understand he didn't play in the playing game in the Houston series, but in an 82 regular season, 82 game season, 12 of their first 17 are back-to-backs. They're older. That's just the truth, right? JK is vital. He was their third leading scorer last year, and him coming back, and I believe this is, the Thunder have set the bar, right? They are very close-knit as a team. For him to come back and, be all about, feeling good, I think that's very, very important. And so when you look at, where this has gone, Brian, I would say that, to me, again, I agree. The Warriors are doing what they, can based on the rules and whatnot. But if JK is very important to your team, I would need a guy, bought in. And I think the problem for them, if JK doesn't feel good about the deals being offered, is if he comes back on the QO, and a lot of times you talk to GMs around the league, when you're in win now mode, like the Warriors are, right, and trying to maximize the rest of Steph and Draymond's window and Jimmy and his, get him his first ring, you need everybody bought in. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, I don't really want a guy who hasn't gotten paid yet or gotten a bigger contract, even if it's an older guy, on an expiring deal in a year that you're trying to win everything, because naturally, where's that person's mind going to? So do I think, if JK came back on the QO, would he be excited to play? Yeah, he's itching to play right now. But the reality is the number one thing for JK and his family, and if I'm watching, advising, is he's got to get to the summer of 26, 27 healthy. That is the most important thing. So, if JK wasn't that important to the Warriors, then fine. And Slater and I talk about this, I'll see, a fan base or some of the people say, why this guy's holding everything up? Like, get rid of him. I don't like this guy. Fine. That's my point. If you don't like him, that's fine, but let him go. But if you're not going to let him go or renounce him, then you have your full mid-level. You can sign and trade. You can, move and shake. But if he is important and he does matter, you got to get him to a place where he feels good about the deal. And the QO for JK has risk, but it has upside in its own way. Not necessarily, it'll take him a couple years to make back maybe the money he would lose. But again, he believes in himself. I believe in him. We've looked at his 10-year forecast. We've put it in Excel spreadsheets. We've done all that. But he's also educated himself on what the QO means to the other side, to the Warriors. And we've talked through this many times. And he believes the Warriors need him. He thinks his teammates do. I do. I think everybody who's really watched the Warriors thinks he's a very important piece. Now, would we get deeper in the season in the playoff series? Would Steve maybe move him out of the rotation? Sure, that's possible. We've seen it before. But to get through 82 games, to manage minutes, back-to-backs, he's very important. And whether it's with him or his number, he is really the most important piece for the Warriors, because they need him to take a jump and ascend, especially to play against the Thunder. And one of my people, when I talk to around the league, I said, if you really want to study JK and learn about JK, just watch him against the Thunder. That'll tell you everything you need to know, how he plays against them, how he steps up against them. So they need that. And if it's not him, they need his number. They need to move him to bring somebody else to help him. Go look at their cap sheet and go see the movable salaries they have if Jonathan Kuminga is on a QO.
This is such a reality of the new era that you can talk so openly about, because, like, let's be honest, this is what the Warriors did with D'Angelo Russell. They signed D'Angelo Russell in the Durant sign and trade so that they could have a piece to trade later, which they did for Wiggins, which ended up being a big move.
Oh, by the way, they didn't just trade him for Andrew Wiggins. They traded him for the draft pick that became Jonathan Kuminga.
Yes. And so anyway, I just say this. We'll wrap up now, but I will say that it's easy for me to say this because I got no skin in the game, Aaron. But I say at the end of this, the Warriors are going to have a contract that they can trade. It may not be as tradable as they dreamed of. Jonathan is going to be protected financially, and you're going to have made a major stride from where they were on July 1st to where they are in September, whatever. And I think it's all going to work out. But again, it's easy for me to say that.
The only thing I would ask you, Brian, is do you think JK on a 2+1 in that number range is not a tradable contract?
And the +1, you're talking player, not team.
Is that not a tradable contract?
I think it reduces his value marginally. Like if you're trying to get the most tradable thing, you don't want the player on a short deal because the team who's trading for him doesn't want to have to deal with worrying about him in a year. But it's not it's not crushing. It's not like you're signing him to a 17-year contract.
It's not ideal. It's not the front end and the back end. And my point, and we can leave on this. The point is, if you want to win now, and to the points we made of why we value the player option and JK does, and you want a guy that's happy and feels treated fairly, who is a big part of this team, we believe, moving forward, you give him the player option. You're right, Brian. You did lose a little bit of that, trade value. But if it's about the here and now, you give him that, you keep your relationship, and you don't get a perfect deal, but you get a pretty good deal, and he gets to feel respected about what he gets, and we all move on and worry about winning, and like he said, helping Steph. And he said this in the meeting with Joe, I'm all in to help Steph. Let's send him out. We should be focusing on winning right now, and I'm fine with that. But again, you have to take a little bit of the hit, Warriors, in terms of you don't have the back end. But if Jake 2 years from now, you want to keep him, you have his bird rights, you treat him good, and you show him, hey, the plan around him, then maybe you keep him. So it's not perfect, but I don't think anybody can get anything they really want. If you ask JK, he wants Jalen Green's deal. He's not getting that. He wants Jalen Johnson's deal. You're not getting that. Warriors, we feel like pick front end, number lower, player option. If that number needs to be lower to stay in the second apron, or it's about really controlling the back end of the deal, move the number up, shake your roster up, and you can have a team option. Or the hybrid model, let him keep his no trade clause.
Well, I would just say one of my big theories, anybody listening to this podcast knows I'm an actions over words guy. I think Mike Dunleavy is doing his job. I think you're doing your job. I think Jonathan did his job because he's getting offered, $10 tens of millions of dollars a year. He did his job to get to this point.
Mhm.
And the actions of the Warriors are the actions of a team that wants to get the player under contract. I don't know if they envision him as a guy that's going to be there in 2030, but their actions are of a player who wants to get him under contract, and your job is to get the best possible, and you're in the middle of the fight. And I appreciate you opening this window and letting us know the way you're thinking, and we'll see how it goes. But I think at the end of this, I really do believe everybody's going to be able to feel good about it. And I say that I've seen restricted free agencies end when that's not the case.
Mhm.
I feel like this is going to be there. You can say to me, yeah, but I wouldn't disagree with you.
Brian loves happy endings. He
Well,
has a movie, and I should. Sorry, can we cut that out?
Thanks, Slater. No, don't cut it. I want you to leave it in. It's fine.
Brian loves movies with rosy finishes. There you go.
This can work. I think the biggest thing on Slater touched on this the other day, I think it is important when you have a player this important as JK to feel good about the business so that the basketball can be the focus. If the winning didn't matter and it was like, hey, whatever, then I would agree that, how he feels is probably pretty irrelevant. But I think, he's pretty important. They won't let him go. And if you're going to tell somebody your contract's over with us and you have a team that wants to give you $100 million or so in a player option and a starting role, but we're not going to let you go and we're not going to give you a great deal. We're going to give you a deal we can take advantage of. Don't ask I wouldn't ask somebody to necessarily be happy about that. I know I personally wouldn't really be very happy about that.
Hey, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
Find some and got clean, took a bunch of acid. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. I'll be talking to Nick Fuentes. Don't think I'm not self-conscious about not having a shirt on. I am a bit, but I don't know, man. I favor authenticity over a lot of other values. That doesn't mean that I'm not sometimes duplicitous, disingenuous, and dishonest. Of course I am. I'm fallen, and I fall into dishonesty frequently. But today, in my conversation with Nick Fuentes, I tried my best to follow the line. Indeed, if there's a moment that defined that interview, it's the one where I say to Nick Fuentes, I don't want to be like some kind of Mrs. Doubtfire, where over here I'm talking to people that are Jewish and I'm saying, yes, no, well, of course, of course you deserve a homeland. And yes, and I don't want to be over here saying like, oh, it's terrible what's going on in Gaza. Isn't that what integrity means? That we are integrated, that we are fully integrated with ourselves and with our Lord, and please God, with one another. So we have a pretty good conversation. We talk about the significance, obviously, of Charlie Kirk's death. We talk about the protests in the UK over the weekend. Indeed, if I may be so bold, I think that in this conversation with agitator Nick Fuentes, who I've seen described in liberal and sort of leftist circles in the most discriminatory and condemnatory terms, I tried to have a good faith conversation, and I think that we discovered in it some important points about how modern media is impacting power, and that the defining attribute of modern media, using Malcolm McLuhan's famous edict, which Nick Fuentes cited, the medium is the message, is that if the medium is the message in the old days meant the medium is print media and TV, that means it's centralized and it's controlled, either state or commercial. And these days we have diffuse decentralized media. Then we're living in a time of pivotal change, and Charlie Kirk's murder is an indicator of those changing power dynamics, ongoing attempts to centralize, control, and sanitize information, regardless of whether you think what qualities or assets, attributes you assign to his murderer. The fact, the absolute fact, the key fact, the important fact is that he, Charlie Kirk, among others, is a modern phenomena of new technology, primarily, even though Charlie Kirk's views are sort of very traditional in a bunch of ways. He's a modern phenomena. I think you'll like this conversation. If you're watching us on YouTube, my understanding is that Nick Fuentes' content is heavily censored there. And I must say, I don't think that's right at all. I don't think that's right at all. But I would think that whoever I was talking to, unless they were shirtlessly screaming obscenities about one ethnicity or a particular ideology or an individual, I really am learning that there is only one authority. That authority is not human, nor can it be. Okay, so here's the conversation. If you're watching this anywhere other than Rumble, click over and join us on Rumble because it's too hotly contested and controversial to put anywhere else. And if you don't have Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now because I financially benefit from that, as well as in a more general sense, it consolidates my audience and means that I have some ongoing influence even as I face criminal trials in the United Kingdom, civil trials in the United States, spiritual trials every second of my waking life. But we rejoice when we face trials of any kind. Here's me talking to Nick Fuentes. I'm joined by Nick Fuentes. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on here today. I suppose the main things that I'll want to talk about is our mutual and shared love of our Savior Jesus. If it's okay with you, I want to talk about some people connecting the assassin of Charlie Kirk to your work, but I've only seen that in particular places on the left. Your very, I thought, dignified obituary or acknowledgement, rather, of Charlie Kirk's death. Perhaps we'll I suppose, with whatever level of sensitivity we consider to be appropriate, discuss what Candace Owens has been saying about the potential attempt to intervention into Charlie Kirk's life by, what do we say, powers or connected to Israel. And then I reckon it'll probably naturally lead to us talking about the political and religious entity of Israel, so that I can sort of better understand it, and we'll just see what comes out of that naturally, shall we? All right, mate. So, well,
absolutely, yeah, sounds good.
Oh, thanks, Nick Fuentes. Well, like, one of the things I know about you is that you're very, very overt and passionate and clear about what you believe in, and certainly that seems to succeed in the media space that we all operate in now. I've got to say that when even actually prior to Charlie Kirk's assassination, that very day, in fact, I was doing a live stream and I felt like I can't keep doing this. I can't keep having these kind of conversations and endlessly pontificating on a cyclical news agenda, whether it's Putin meeting Xi. I don't know whether a sort of near-peer alliances across the world, if that is good or bad for people in general when compared to American imperialism. Then, like, Israel had killed some Hamas leadership in Qatar, I think, and Russia had bombed Poland a little bit, or at least some missiles had gone to Polish territory. And I felt like, look, this is also complicated. I don't know what to say. And then married to that, Nick, I was thinking about like everything that gets thrown into the maelstrom of our culture, whether it's Cracker Barrel changing its logo or things that are more impactful and significant, is so divisive and utilized. And I felt a little bit exhausted by it. How do you feel? Like, do you think that like Charlie Kirk is almost a Princess Diana moment of like a sort of in some places unearned sentimentality, in other places very real grief, in other places exploitation, in other places more division? Does this feel to you, as objectively as you can be, to be a sort of a significant moment, an epochal moment even? And do you feel emboldened by it, encouraged in some way by the response, or does it make you feel kind of exhausted?
Well, it's always difficult to say so soon after it happens, because in the moment it feels like the biggest thing, and it seems that the world will never be the same. But of course, we've seen a lot of things like that over the years, and we hardly even remember them years later. I think about like the pandemic as an example. Some days I wake up, you forget that even happened. And that was and obviously had ripple effects, but, do they have a grip on us sentimentally years later? Not as much, but I do think it is a truly significant moment in politics. I think that for political people, especially for young people, I think it is going to have a chain reaction. And the question is whether that's going to be good or bad. I think this is part of a larger trend of political violence on the left. And usually I'm not that guy. I'm not the right-left guy. I try to be a little bit more profound than the partisan kind of thing. But of course, it draws obvious comparisons to the Luigi Mangione shooting, to the Trump shooting last year, and as well to the school shootings by many similar individuals, whether they're trans or whether they're, other kinds of extremists, weird spirituality kind of stuff. So I think what people are saying about this, maybe the big picture on all of it, is what is happening to the young people online and with politics. And this is kind of like it's like a violent assertion of the nihilism that we see on the internet in the real world. This is something that is like unseen. A lot of older people don't understand it, but there's something really wrong here. And so I think this is maybe a visible and profound expression of it where it entered the real world. Maybe that's going to be the legacy here.
I think that's an excellent assessment. Yes, something that we've all become accustomed to online, vitriol, invective, somehow safely contained within the screen, a kind of like methadone rage that's not going to really hurt anyone except for maybe your feelings if you read too much of it, has now had real life consequences. I would agree. Now, how do you connect it to what seems to be a broader trend that online media, pundits, commentators, influencers and activists, a category that would include to varying degrees, certainly Charlie Kirk, yourself, and even me, perhaps, and the direct impact of these voices on meaningful political outcomes. Do you feel, Nick, that in part, one of the larger struggles that may be defining our culture is this attempt to manage and continue to centralize information as technology affords a kind of information diaspora? Do you think, in short, aside from your assessment, that it's likely by your analysis, although we've mentioned that other people are saying it's like literally a fan of yours? I mean, I don't know, because I don't trust no one, basically, really. So I'm not trying to push that on you, and I don't figure you'd care. You seem like a pretty bold man. Do you feel that Charlie Kirk's murder is, in a way, part of this sort of somewhat nebulous but also general struggle to control information that leads sometimes to outliers, again, that would include you, me and Charlie, being either smeared, attacked or shut down? Because whether you agree with you on things, and certainly I'm sure we'll discuss some of the things that you and I disagree on, the people that have the institutions that have most to lose from this new discourse are old systems of authority that are struggling to cope with a new information landscape.
I absolutely do. And it's interesting that you say that, because who is being blamed for the murder? Let's set aside for a moment who actually did it and people's thoughts on it. What is the perception of the public? People think on the right that it was a radical leftist on Discord, a sexual deviant, transgender, a furry, someone from Antifa, anti-fascist, a communist. What do people on the left believe? It's the Nazis. They think it's people further to the right than Charlie Kirk who hated him for being too moderate. And if you look at the polling, the young people are very convinced. The right's convinced it's the far left. The left is convinced it's the far right. And I can't help but notice that when people blamed me, it was so effective. It's possible that it was organic, but it seemed to me like it came from the top down. It seemed to me like this was a narrative that was pushed in an organized way, just based on how quickly and how much saturation it achieved in a short time. Although it's possible it's the madness of the crowds in a crisis like this. And you have to wonder, when you look at society, it's not static, it's dynamic. People talk about a pendulum swinging back and forth, or a dialectic. There's sort of a thesis and antithesis. What is on the other side of what we're seeing now? Who is being blamed? The far right, the far left, foreign powers. On the other side of that conversation is a call for something like digital ID, something like censorship, centralized. We can't let radical political thought fester. We can't let foreign intel manipulate us. So what's the answer? There needs to be a regulated media environment. So I do suspect that there is something very dark and sinister happening. And you hit the nail on the head. It actually does have to do with information and who controls the dissemination of information. So that's spot on, and that's like next level. That's got to be the next conversation on this.
We can't make this content without the support of our financial partners. That's simply the nature of the deal that we have with Rumble. I have a minimum guarantee. We sell advertising space on the channel, and that goes towards the money that I get from Rumble. That don't mean, though, that I don't believe in these messages. Indeed, I have commercial relationships with partners whose products I believe and I pray will be of some benefit to you. If they are, buy them. Do me a favor. You're poor, and you've got to do something about it. Getting rich in 2025 is actually simpler than most people think. Is it? You don't need years of experience or a fancy degree from Harvard that leaves you in debt. You can actually start earning in a few weeks, whether it's a high-paying job or you just want to launch something of your own. AI isn't just helpful anymore, it's required. Nearly all jobs today demand prompting via you're quite right to, I hope I'm saying this right, direct us towards the kind of quo bono argument. Who benefits from this? And from that perspective, Nick, left and right become kind of almost sort of tepid adjectives. Left, right, who cares? As long as it's an extreme person, we can legitimize ID, online, control, surveillance, censorship, and that's plainly the agenda. As soon as information became distributable in the manner that it has done, the legitimization of control became very important. And I'm looking at the significant markers that are concomitant with this type of technology. They include, obviously, 9/11, and the Patriot Act, 2008, and the sort of social movements, whether it's like the Tea Party or Occupy, that came out of that, and then COVID, which we touched upon. And you're right that COVID has already been beautifully neglected and sort of consumed by our cultural amnesia, and I feel because it was such a it was so general and ubiquitous that it somehow actually becomes more forgettable. This is like such a spike that I feel functionally this is gonna be a clearer marker, because when I was trying to look for a precedent, Nick, I had to look at the political assassinations, I suppose, of the kind of 60s, and Charlie Kirk in so many ways couldn't be more different from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Kennedys, and the people that, gosh, even if you think of a pop cultural figure like John Lennon, say, Charlie Kirk is a product of his time, even though he's very traditional and conservative and all of those things that are sort of at the forefront of Charlie Kirk's public identity. As a sort of a phenomenon, he's part of a movement that's primarily, I would say, connected to the as yet not fully realized potential of these new information resources to affect real life outcomes. And the fact that he, as you said, is like a spilling over of online social dynamics into real life through violence, I reckon that might be an indicator of the broader dialectic here. We are experiencing old institutions realizing that they cannot robustly control in the way that they once did information. So whether you're saying, hey, everyone should be trans, or rights for Palestinians, or the kind of content that you're more commonly associated with, or that I'm more commonly associated with, the thing that we all have in common, even where we disagree, is we're sort of arguing for, and this is interesting, I think, Nick, because I think it's essential, the ultimate argument, would you agree, is centralized power versus decentralized power, even though a lot of the time it's presented as a tribal argument for who controls the center. Perhaps the solution is there is no center now. There isn't a center in the same way. You can't aggregate power in the way that you once did. So I suppose that's in a way just a further exploration of some of the things that we'd already said. If that's true, do you think that we should be exploring ways of seeking truces, alliances, or at least less combative discourse with our opponents?
Absolutely. And it's it's so funny. I feel like we're very aligned on this. Maybe we had a similar reaction to it because, it's not lost on people that there are real cleavages in society. There is real tension between the races, the religions, the genders, the partisan sides. And so the powers that be did not create those tensions, but they do exacerbate them all the time. And they exacerbate those tensions for, that's where the word conspiracy comes from, for a sort of unseen, concealed agenda, which is convoluted and sophisticated. It's not easily accessible. And I got the sneaking suspicion that that is what this provided, which was an opportunity to drive the right against the left, especially when there does seem to be maybe some consensus forming. I know a lot of my clips were becoming popular among liberals and left-wing people because of my criticisms of the Trump administration, of the conduct in Israel. And to the extent that there's a horseshoe, or a far right, far left, maybe realizing they have something in common, this gets in the middle of that process and says, no, we're going to see now a rerun of the right versus the left. And now the right has got to puff up their chest and get angry at the far left. And so on my show on Thursday, I said, we actually need to not take the bait and not lean into our first instinct, which is to get angry at all leftists or all liberals or demonize the other side. And we should really isolate it out and say, obviously, people that want political violence, that's unacceptable. People that encourage or incite terrorism, that can't be allowed in a free society. That's antithetical to a free society. And we should take the opportunity actually to show magnanimity and benevolence to the other side and really kind of stand against any forces that would try to use this to manipulate us, because they really count on people, because it is so sensational, to get whipped up in the moment and then become irrational. Maybe a week ago, people realized right and left might be an artificial divide that they kind of exacerbate when it's convenient. When you see someone get their neck exploded like that, it suspends reason, people forget, and they just want to see the other side pay. So I do think it's an opportunity to, and although it's difficult for the right, find some consensus, not necessarily with the people that want to shoot us in the head or disrespect a vigil or something like that, but with people that want to see America succeed. And they exist on the left also.
I've been surprised in the last 5 years in particular how ideals that had strong affiliations with one side of that presumed divide have mobilized and transferred. Like even now, I've seen several very highly regarded people that are on the right who prior to the election of Trump I would have found natural affinity with when it came to the subject of free speech, saying people that have said appalling things about Charlie Kirk posthumously ought be punished in some way. And it's difficult for me as a person that I'm really trying my best and obviously failing to observe principles. And I suppose it's not a principle if it can't withstand the vicissitudes of a culture. That's not a principle then. Now we're dealing with utility. I agree with free speech over here, but not over here. And I was sort of surprised, because I think someone on the left that I watched said, well, when we were saying you oughtn't be able to criticize trans people or whatever, you were saying there's no such thing as hate speech, and now people are saying pretty disgusting stuff about Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul. You're saying that they should be punished. So how do you find, do you have challenges in observing principles when you must be aware, as we all are, about what aspect of your content is successful? How do you resist, and how are you impacted by what you know to be effective about your online content and work?
Well, I have to say that there's always a temptation because the crowd goes one way and always based on instinct, always based on emotion. And even in my case, it wasn't even so much against the left. With my audience, they wanted to rush and blame Israel. That was the first gut reaction of my audience. And in this case, I said, I'm certainly not reluctant to blame Israel for one thing or another if there's evidence. I mean, based on who I am, I said, but he was a pro-Israel guy. So, I mean, that would be like saying if Ben Shapiro got taken out, God forbid, and people said Israel did it. That would be pretty far-fetched, but that was kind of the rush to judgment on our side was it's the same suspect. It's always the same culprit. And I guess for me, it always just goes back to you have to tell the truth. I think that a lot of people, and that seems obvious, but what a lot of people find themselves doing when they talk about these things is they want to satisfy an emotional craving, an emotional state. And you really need to be careful. Am I telling the truth? Am I being objective? Am I looking at the facts? Or am I saying these things to satisfy something that I'm feeling right now? Because I think that's what a lot of people are doing. Another thing that they do is they tend to fall back on this kind of heuristic level thinking or like a rule way of thinking where they say something bad happens. Oh, well, Israel is implicated when bad things happen. Or, a right-wing person got shot. It came from the left. We have to get away from that kind of heuristic-based thinking and think more in terms of maybe zoom out and get a broader sense of perspective. And I think in terms of second and third order effects. We have to be a little bit smarter than just kind of like our first gut reaction. It's like we just said a moment ago, yes, everybody's first impulse is people are making us unhappy, punish them. People are saying these things, we got to go after them. We have to think, though, what is the knock-on effect? What's the chain reaction? Okay, we punish these people. What do they do next? What do they do in a year? What do they do in 2 years? What does the government take away from this? What could be justified down the road? We always have to be a little bit smarter than we want to be in a moment like that. But that takes some patience. It takes time to develop that sense.
When I saw Bob Vylan, who's like a British kind of garage or drill hip hop artist, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, like this, so sort of delighted in profanity that I feel like I might have like a old lady. I may have gasped. I may have gone, oh! Like, I may have like clutched my pearls, literally, I then sort of tried to think, how can I have a reaction that's even interesting or useful? Forget content making. I mean, actually in the real essence of who I am and who I want to be and who I'm trying to be. And I thought, do you know what came to me when I even invited such a perspective that in 2001, on the 12th of September, I dressed as Osama bin Laden just because I was aware of how much sort of tumult there was in the culture. I wasn't famous yet. I was like hosting on MTV, but it was the same as being on local radio, really. It was no kind of big deal. But I was sort of full of appetite for fame and attention. And when I saw Bob Vylan doing that, I was like, I know that. That's that thing where just because something big is happening, you want to kind of move into it in some way. And either you can move into it with sanctimony or you can move in it like a vandal, tossing stones at it. Now, I guess what I'm trying to do, like you're saying, is be authentic and truthful and be of some use and some value. And I'll be honest with you, I don't find that easy. And I found it harder still since I got accused and charged, in fact, with rape in my country. And when after that, I'm still dealing with it, and I've got to go to trial next year in June for it. But the sort of real life consequences of course, a very sort of promiscuous past and a very selfish and sinful and in many ways exploitative past, I think, alloyed to my current position in online media and the impact of that, particularly probably around COVID and subjects like war, although I don't have a full understanding, although I have a better understanding than I once did, of, as you say, how these conspiracies are somewhat diffuse, multivalent, not immediately obvious, and probably participants that aren't even aware of their own participation. Do you know the reference I always use here, Nick? And I wonder if it's a reference you're familiar with. It's somewhat interesting because it's already sort of like tinged in nostalgia. Probably about 30, maybe 40 years ago, Andrew Marr, a British journalist for the BBC, was interviewing Noam Chomsky, probably Noam Chomsky at the height of his esteem and excellence. He's probably, thinking about it now, promoting the manufacture of dissent, although that seems like the manufacture of consent, which seems like a ridiculous idea because it's such a sort of an important book, but to imagine him being on a book tour or whatever. But when he's doing the BBC interview, Andrew Marr, the now yet more esteemed BBC TV journalist, said, in your book, Manufacture of Consent, you say that all journalists are told what to say and that we've all been conditioned and we're all participating in manipulating the public. Well, I'm a journalist and I'm not doing that. No one's told me what to say today. I'm saying what I want to say. And Noam Chomsky says, no, you've misunderstood. What I'm saying is if you weren't saying what they wanted you to say, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair. And people don't know the way that institutional media functions and what the complexity of those relationships are and how the sort of channels of what seems to me now to be a pretty extremist ideology, even if you separate religion, even though I do consider this to be spiritual war. In fact, that's one thing that I'm increasingly certain of. The organized power behind these various institutional actions is described in scripture. That's what I believe, and I'd love to know what you think about that. But the way that media, state, global corporations operate together to essentially maintain and increase control is an organized, planned intelligence, and I think you could basically call it the devil or evil or Satan or whatever term, seemed most appropriate to you. So I recognize how diffuse and complex it can be. That said, Nick, I'd love your response just to that great barrage of language I hurled your way, and the fact that some of it was kind of personal, of course. But also, I'd like to add to that: we'll move in the direction of talking about personal responsibility and love when commentating on issues that can generate a lot of vitriol. So I guess you'll know where I'm going based on that.
Yeah, you're describing the survivorship bias, which is that everybody that's in media, it's sort of like what you see versus what you don't see. Everybody that's in media has been kept around, and that's for a reason. It's because, either they're a conventional thinker or they're not rebellious or they're predictable or something like that. And I think that you're right. People just don't understand the dynamics of how and where the power actually comes from. I don't think they actually, because it is a complex dynamic, the interplay between media, state, military, and something that I've been really in on or really focused on over the past few years is how it seems that everything is downstream from the national security state in particular. A lot of people like to think in terms of everything's about profits, like left-wing types. At one time, they talked a lot more about the CIA and about the Pentagon and the military. Now I feel like all they talk about is the billionaires and the wealthy and the 1%. The more that I look at the media environment and the longer that I've been doing this and analyzing it, the more it seems that everything in the society proceeds from the interests and the needs of the security state. And in particular, its posture towards foreign countries. It's posture towards Russia, its posture, and then necessarily towards its allies, because it needs its allies as a bulwark against its enemies. And then, of course, how that reflects the domestic conversation. So, for example, if there is chaos in America, let's say there's days of lead in America, political violence, chaos, who does that benefit? The cui bono, that benefits America's adversaries necessarily. So does it behoove America's adversaries that want to see us fall to lean into that kind of division? Conversely, it benefits the American security state for there to be stability because there's 350 million people. How many soldiers? 1 million? How many cops? In order to keep everything stable and everything orderly, they need people to actually choose stability, choose lawfulness, etc. And so there is more that rests on the stability of the society than the force of the state. It's also the belief of the people in the political order. They have to believe it's legitimate. And if they don't, then they don't follow the laws. Maybe they take some of the government's power from the government. They start to manage their own affairs. Society starts to federalize or confederate. And so you start, once you think like this, you realize things have to be a very specific way. And the media has to condition and enforce that. Education has to condition and enforce that. Entertainment has to condition and enforce that. And that then a lot of how things are starts to make a lot more sense. And in some sense, we have to live with that. I guess that's how it will always be.
Here's a quick break now while we go to one of our partners. Whoever you are, you might consider yourself a businessman or woman or person, or I don't know, maybe you don't have a gender or don't want one. That's not the key issue here, though. The key issue is 1775, a delicious coffee. Let's be honest, most coffee, all it does is it helps you to organize a today. To me, to be a very accurate analysis, Nick, consider just taking two examples. How radically, as we've touched upon already, technological advancement has altered the world of communications in the way that we have discussed. And some plain examples of its impact beyond just cultural comms, say, might be Napster's impact on the record industry, online media's impact on the outcome of Trump 2016, let alone last time Trump, and Brexit 2015 or whenever that was. Additionally, the emergence of something like Uber and the impact that would make on an industry like minicabs wherever you are in the world, or Airbnb on the way that the hotel and short-term rental industry would operate. That technology has radicalized, revolutionized, I think, every one of those areas that I've listed. And yet there is an attempt to maintain rigidly stasis within the most important systems of power. And I would agree with you that, in a sense, a billionaire is merely symptomatic of the types of permanent powers that you allude to with the sort of the three-letter agencies and whatever they're an expression of, whatever they are an expression of. So earlier on, we touched on the need to resist our first reaction, resist the temptation to participate, because even though you said there is a requirement domestically for stability, within that stability, of course, it would be, you want not healthy debate, you want actually vitriolic debate within that window to ensure that the sort of that polarization in itself ensures an energized stability. What you don't want is people to say, look, do you know what, actually, if people are that concerned that Texas is run this way, let people run Texas that way. And in fact, we have such a good example of this outside of your country, my own country, the UK. We there was that massive Tommy Robinson march, I'm sure you're aware, of the weekend. And what was fascinating, we had a correspondent, I'm going to call him, even though another way of describing it would be my mate Joe. My mate Joe went, who, he was corresponding, we corresponded. He said that when he was talking to the sort of patriotic British folk that were all about, but let's face it, a lot of it was motivated by migration. But I see migration as symptomatic of a deeper problem, as a matter of fact, and focusing on Islam and migration, I think, distracts us from whoever it is that benefits from that kind of hostility towards migrants. Not that I'm saying if people don't want migration, if you live in a democracy, that's the end of that conversation. Let people have a referendum, job done. But he was saying that when he was speaking to the masked Antifa, pallid and demonic, that's my definition of them because I've seen the footage, they loathed Keir Starmer as well. Now, the thing that's interesting about Keir Starmer, and Lord alone knows it's not easy to find something, the thing that's interesting about Keir Starmer is that he is exactly that type of bureaucratic, managerial, neoliberal, WEF, Davos type politician that has been annihilated through the rise of MAGA populism and Trump in your country. There is no consensus. I don't know how the UK government can survive if the people on the left detest you, if the people on the right, and even the right is now a broader category, even though they try to bolster with further adjectives, far right, hard right, smelly, disgusting right. They try whatever they can, but it just seems like normal British people at this point. Like, I wonder if what we're being informed by this is that were we able to legitimately deploy the communication technology that has revolutionized the industries that I iterated at the top there, Nick, in a political sphere, power would fundamentally and radically change, and a precursor to that change might be the type of truces and alliances that we touched on at the top of this. What do you think about all that?
I totally agree. I think that, a lot of people don't realize that the technological revolutions have actually taken place in waves in the past 30 years. And what a lot of people, this is something I've talked about on my show before, you have the internet, you have email, and people think that the internet is synonymous with the later developments like social media or smartphones, but they're not. They're distinct. We've had internet, email, personal computers for a long time. But smartphones and social media, that achieved mass adoption way later than you think. It happened around 2012. And I always think, is it any coincidence that I think the adoption of smartphone and social media hit more than the majority around about 2012 or 2013? Is it a coincidence that it was in the very next election in 2016 that you saw the rise of right-wing populism? Because they are distinct. It's like you got iPhone in 2009, Twitter, YouTube around about the same time. They reach this adoption about 5 years later. Then you get populism. Then you get Occupy. Very soon after, you get right-wing populism. And what happened right after Trump won? You had the antithesis. You had censorship. You had a government attempt to cool off a very hot technology. And they did it through things like this. It was Christchurch. It was, the various other mass shootings, Dylan Roof, among others. It was not even just the social media. They tried to get the telecom companies involved, the domain registrars. There was like a full-fledged attempt to basically undo the development of this like very hot medium of information. The medium is the message. Oh. And what you've seen in reverse, that's not mine, by the way. That's
Malcolm McLuhan.
Right,
I was thinking about it today. Carry on, please. I'll
yeah, absolutely. And what you've seen now in the past 5 years, what's really interesting to me, this is yet, to me, unresolved, all of that has now been reversed. Elon acquired Twitter in 2022. TikTok, coming from China, has different regulations than American social media because they don't have the same kind of NGOs and nonprofits advising them about political speech. So between TikTok and Twitter, you now have a liberalized social media. Then you have others like YouTube, Instagram, they're following suit. Why is it that social media is opening up? Could it be that AI models are being trained on social media because to get the best LLMs, they need the most data, and the data comes from the posts of as many people as possible? That's one postulate. Maybe it's political, but clearly, the convulsions of the past 10 years, they're taking place on social media, from an open social media to a censored social media, back to an open social media. You can map political events onto that, the rise of populism, the pandemic and the Ukraine war, the kind of second wave of populism. You can also map onto it the rise of these even next, the fifth generation, which is AI, and all the rest of it that's going to come down the pike later. And so that, to me, that's sort of, we're in a unique cultural moment now in just the past 3 or 4 years that has not been analyzed enough, that we're still trying to figure out, kind of the why and what's happening just right now with what you just said, Keir Starmer and the rest of it.
It amounts to a kind of temporal warping, Nick. How can we even regard temporality as being consistent if you measure, we understand, by the way, pretty imperfectly, how we would measure velocity. If the density of available information is altering inconceivably to almost a point where it's beyond human conception, then we're not really in the same reality anymore. So the fact that the analytics can't keep up with the progress is not surprising. It's Malcolm McLuhan, isn't it, that said the medium is the message? And I suppose he was making that point in a bunch of ways. But what strikes me about that is the type of media that would have been prevalent then would have been TV and print journalism, and that is centralized and controlled, and therefore it's an indication of the interests and agenda of the people, whether they are commercial partners or sort of old school media barons that own those interests. That would be the message. The media is the message. Now, of course, because of people like you and even me and other people in this space, we're now having to deal with the discordant, sometimes cacophonous, definitely conflict-oriented because of the kind of algorithmic biases that we've touched upon, and they're probably actually are ultimately resourced from a human palate. We respond organically and biologically to highly consequential stimulus, I suppose, might be one way of saying it. But if the medium is the message, meant that once a centralized set or cadre could dictate the way that information was conveyed and the type of information that was conveyed, now we have this giddying diaspora, this sort of blizzard of information. And of course, that requires early on an ability to categorize and create hierarchies and even amplify and eliminate different types of information. And the COVID period, that I agree with you, has been too easily discarded, showed us with the brilliant example of Joe Rogan, they were not ready for someone that had that amount of power and reach to not be on board. One of the challenges is with centralized media, and I wonder if these challenges will still exist with these evolving forms, is that people get co-opted. I was a pretty radical little dude when I made it into Hollywood. I'd already been a drug addict and got clean, took a bunch of acid, been exposed to poverty because of my just sort of environmental and social conditions. Like, I was a little bit radical, one might regard, and it's somewhat of a peripheral figure in a bunch of ways. Anyway, once I get into people rewarding me and celebrating me and telling me I'm fantastic and giving me a bunch of money and having access to sort of lots of sex and stuff, it's difficult. It's going to take a lot of fortitude, and I would argue simply a connection to God, actually. If you're not connected to God, if the culture is your God, then the God is feeding you. The God is feeding you. You're cool. The false idol is proving to be, somewhat truthful in that moment. At least it's fulfilling your pagan needs. Now, I wonder if, in this instance, how easily co-opted and biased and controlled we will be. Because if the medium is, as you say, as citing Malcolm McLuhan, is that right? You'll tell me your answer, I hope. Then if the medium is the message, then the message is you can't centralize power in the same way anymore. You're going to have to yield power. You're going to have to find ways of devolving power. And probably the country that's most likely to be able to accommodate that due to its sort of relatively recent origins and perhaps the robustness, but hopefully the degree of flexibility in your constitution might be your country. Might be your country. It can't see happening in China, Russia, and the Britain's resisting it pretty heavily. And yet that does seem to be the central dynamic. So I wonder, obviously the people that least want that message to be received are those with most to lose. And that is centralized media, the government, the sets of corporate and commercial interests. And if there is some sort of dark occultist power behind that, presumably that too doesn't want it. So how then do you think we promote those ideals, if you agree that they are ideals worth promoting?
Well, it's difficult to say because that is obviously one perspective on it, and that could be the idealistic, the aspirational idea, which is, and certainly that's what I thought for most of my life, for most of my adult life, is that Trump is on Twitter, and that means he can talk to us directly. So there's no gatekeepers, no mods, no censorship. Like, he's connected to us. There's no kind of gatekeeping institution that stands in between and mediates between elected officials and people. But then you think about things like what they said after he won. They said, well, you may think that was the case, but really the Russians were involved. That was the answer from the government, is the Russians manipulated the conversation. And, for the longest time, I said, that's ridiculous. We love Trump because of what he was. And that was true for myself. But you also think about things like the Arab Spring. You also think about the first time that social media was deployed in a political context was by Western NGOs, was by the American empire against these Muslim countries. And it was aspirational. The younger generation demanding change, democracy. But what did it turn into? It turned into Islamism. Hosni Mubarak was replaced by the Muslim Brotherhood. It led to the rise of ISIS in some cases. It certainly benefited Israel in many ways, benefited the American state. And so, even especially over the past 5 years, you have to wonder, the things that you see on Twitter, is it even real? And before we even figured out what was even, you could say, authentic or legitimate on social media, we didn't even have time to figure out that conversation. Now you have AI. Now you have AI, which is deploying their own agents on social media in an automated way, creating images, deep fakes, manipulated images, like with this assassin. One of the things that people say is a discrepancy about the person that's in custody is that he does not resemble the photo that the FBI gave. And the FBI said, well, that's because we AI enhanced and upscaled the resolution of the photo. So it's like, I think that there was maybe this early aspiration that, yes, it would lead to freedom and decentralization. At the same time, though, I think it's even maybe bigger than control and freedom. It's order and chaos. And I think that truly we're getting chaos, and everything that comes with it. Deception, a lack of accountability, people pretending to be someone other than they are, sinister forces manipulating people, preying on the vulnerable, the dumb. And so, and by dumb, I mean the deaf and blind. I mean people that are, in a deeper sense, they're not able to critically think. I think about like my parents. My mom texts me all the time, Nicholas, is this real? I saw this on Twitter. They're not ready for this. They're just not ready for that kind of stuff. And so I think what we're seeing is a destabilization. And to call it freedom is a way to interpret it. But I think in terms of the physical, I like that you said velocity and density, because you can use the physical language to describe these things. It's a destabilization. It's a disintegration. It's an atomization. It's things coming apart. And whenever things come apart in the atomic age, nuclear explosions occur. Energy is unleashed. And on the other side of it is destruction,
But in the quantum age, which is the age we're in, a deeper unity is discovered. Now, the idea that there is that much energy entailed and compounded atomically is the miracle that defines the late industrial age. But the quantum age is that beneath apparent separateness, there is a unity. Perhaps the detectable outskirts of our Lord are felt there. To your point about the Islamic Brotherhood that benefited from the Arab Spring revolutions, one of my friends, I hope he's still my friend, some people don't survive all of this stuff, Adam Curtis, the filmmaker, said that, they were ready to go with an idea. While there's all this sort of chaos of, how should we run it? Who's going to be in charge? Should we have a new assembly? We'll vote for this. In come the Muslim Brotherhood. We got an idea. Let's go. And I wonder if there is. I'm a Christian, so that means at the forefront, when C.S. Lewis says, when C.S. Lewis says, we won't be trying to create some kind of theocracy. What we should be doing is you have a Christian accountant. As I'm listing this, I'm bearing in mind I'm talking to Nick Fuentes, so see if you get this joke because it's coming down the line. You have a Christian accountant, a Christian lawyer, a Christian movie mogul, so I wonder, a Christian banker and goldsmith. I'm thinking that if we find Christ, we must find Christ, and we must live allow Him to live through us, and that's a kind of annihilation of the self, isn't it?
We'll have to do some Russell Brand videos. Deep thinker. But yeah, we ran a bit late, started late. Next week, hoping to come back better than ever. Take this week, organize some processes, get better logistically. But let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, Lord, we just ask that you would. We don't even ask anything first, God. We just acknowledge you as our King and our Lord, and our Creator, Provider, and good Father. Give you thanks, praise. Say all the glory is yours. Thanks for this opportunity to stream. For family, for all your blessings. That you bless everybody who listens to this. That you come near to everybody that has been impacted by Charlie Kirk's assassination. I guess that you'd help us to pick up the mic, and to be obedient to you and spread your truth and be used by you for the kingdom. We pray in your Son Jesus' name. Amen. Okay.